Alicia, is the cover on that?
There we go.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Ready?
Yep.
All right. Call the meeting to order at 6:01. Everybody rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Alicia, can you do a roll call, please?
Yep. Steve Dagalo.
Here.
Ryan Telshaw.
Here.
Ian McDonald.
Here.
Lori Belargin.
Here.
Bruce Belargin.
Here.
Annie Erickson.
Here.
Matt Foucault.
Here. All right. Every week we read the district mission. Everybody can see that on the agenda. I just was going to read the core values tonight instead. So we believe each and every person is capable of success. We believe each and every person is accepted and valued. We believe in empowering all learners. We believe change is our opportunity for growth. We believe involved communities foster strong schools. We believe lifelong learning is essential for personal growth. And we believe in cultivating leaders. Next item is approval of the agenda. Is there anybody ready to make a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
I'm gonna add this memo.
Pardon me?
Memo from Shannon.
Oh, that's not listed? Yeah, so I will make a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the memo from Jesse Thorson
Section 5.
to section 5.
There's a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay, thank you. We'll add that as a part of the superintendent report. All right, public comment. Just gonna read through this quickly. Please remember, all comments shall be directed to the board and not to staff or other meeting attendees. All statements should be directed to me, and as no person may address or question board members individually. The board will receive such input without comment or take no action relative to any items brought forth. We may direct the district administrator to consider such an item at an appropriate place on the agenda or a subsequent meeting. When you get to the podium, please state your name, address, and you will have 3 minutes after that. Okay, first one, Aaron, you're up.
Erin Belargin, 2286 County Road I. If this were a classroom, I'd be an ineffective professional educator if I encountered some misconceptions that I did not address. I'm here to promote at least a proficiency in understanding some vocabulary and how it's used in context. I will share definitions that Wisconsin educators use to promote common understanding and avoid misinterpretation of terms. I'll share the summary after my comment. The first term is educational equity. The Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction uses the 2017 definition from the Council of Chief State School Officers. Equity means every learner has access to the resources and rigor they need at the right moment in their education, despite race, gender, ethnicity, language, ability, family background, or family income. The second term is inclusion. In Wisconsin public education, this is tied to compliance with federal laws. Inclusion means that students with disabilities are taught in general education classrooms to the greatest extent possible, required by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 300-114. Inclusion also means that all students, regardless of background or abilities, are counted in the state and federal accountability systems, required by the Every Student Succeeds Act, Title I, Part A. The third term is diversity. In Wisconsin public education, diversity shows up in Wisconsin's guiding principles for teaching and learning as Principle 6, responsive environment to engage learners. Summarizing, effective classroom learning environments are responsive to a broad range of student needs, cultural, linguistic, developmental, academic readiness, learning styles, and creates a respectful climate where instruction and curriculum take into account the background and needs of every learner. Ultimately, we don't discriminate. I understand that you do your research. However, throwback to high school English, not all sources are credible and not all research is of the same quality. Vetted, reliable, accurate, and relevant. Eliminating buzzwords from our language because of incomplete understanding will not change the fact that Wisconsin public educators strive every day to meet the unique educational needs of each of our children. We strive every day to include these children who have the right to learn and grow their understanding of their world. We strive every day to acknowledge and celebrate the different assets every child brings. Thanks to Wisconsin State Statute 118.15, compulsory attendance, youth have to be here and we don't get to pick who shows up, unlike other institutions. No two children arrive exactly alike, and that is diversity. We welcome who we get. We teach them, grow them, include them, support them, and celebrate them, not in spite of who they are, but because of who they are. Speaking as a Wisconsin professional educational leader, I hope this clarification of terms from the profession promotes an accurate understanding for your discussion activity this evening. Speaking as a parent, let's make it an excellent place. Thank you.
All right, Stacy, you're up next. And I'll raise my hand at 15 seconds left, so you're aware.
My name is Stacy Belil. I live at 760 150th Avenue in New Richmond. I teach 7th and 8th grade social studies and ELA at the middle school. I'm here tonight to give you an idea of what happens in my classroom on a daily basis that might provide some examples of social emotional learning. I'll start with everyday things that I do that I think would count as social emotional learning because I believe that there is an inaccurate definition being pushed out to people. When a student is hungry because they didn't eat breakfast or they didn't like their lunch or they're just hungry, I give them a snack. When we have time at the end of class, sometimes we'll play a quick game to have a little fun and reinforce learning, and I'll throw some candy out to winners. I have feminine hygiene products in my room for anyone who needs them. When a student shows me a book that they're interested in and I don't have it, I will buy it from my classroom library. I want to be clear that everything that I just listed is funded entirely by me. No taxpayer dollars have been spent on any of that social emotional learning. When a student has had a success in a sport or activity over the weekend that I know about, I make sure that I congratulate them and ask them to tell me about it when I see them on Monday. If a student is struggling in class and has their head down, I'll usually walk by quietly and ask, struggling with a lesson, sleepy or sad? Then I'll help them with whatever it is at a time when they're ready for help. My colleagues and I often attend our students' events on our own time because they really like it when they see us there. It makes them feel important and it lets them know that we care. When students are struggling with friendships and social situations, we talk with them and figure out how to help them fix it. We teach reading and math and science and writing, but we are teaching those subjects to people who have their own thoughts, emotions, experiences, and circumstances. Those things don't stop when they enter our building. In order to best teach our kids, we have to treat them like people who have feelings, because they are people who have feelings. Every single student who walks through my door every single day is valued, will be heard, and is welcome. Every single one, every single day. I'll wrap up tonight with this. There are no boys in our girls' bathrooms. There are no boys on our girls' sports teams. There are no boys in our girls' locker rooms. There are no boys asking to be in any of those spaces, nor in any of those teams, to my knowledge. To try to bring that talking point to Somerset schools is disingenuous, and it relies on tapping into fear and hate in order to push a larger agenda. However, if there were a student who was transgender, we have a plan in place in order to keep that student feeling safe and feeling respected. We have gender-neutral facilities in order to ensure the safety of those students, just as we ensure the safety of all students every day. We work hard to make sure that all students feel safe at school, feel respected at school, and know that they are welcome at school. Thank you.
Brandon?
Brandon Berry, 858 205th Avenue, Somerset. Be curious, not judgmental. This may be a familiar phrase to those fans of Ted Lasso or Walt Whitman, but it's also a good mantra for everyone to live by. Meeting after meeting, we continue to hear from those that come from a position of ignorance. There is nothing wrong with ignorance itself, but there is something wrong when it is used to be judgmental with no desire to be curious. When I hear people bring national rhetoric into this community and assume the things they hear on social media or through a political organization's talking points are happening in our Somerset schools, I know they're not being curious. They have no desire to learn about what we do in Somerset, let alone why we do it. They heard that the teachers and administration in schools are pushing an agenda on students. They heard there are litter boxes in our schools, tampons in our boys' restrooms, and that teachers and administration are indoctrinating students into some way of thinking that they themselves cannot even define. That rhetoric cannot be further from the truth of how we operate in Somerset. Unfortunately, this is what happens when there are groups trying to undermine all school districts. These groups create fake controversies that play on basic human emotions and facts be damned. I've heard about enough from those that supposedly are for parents' rights, claiming that we as educators are indoctrinating students. Let me give you a dose of reality, and hopefully it will be met with curiosity instead of judgment. This lanyard was given to me 12 years ago when I started here in Somerset. This exact one. Mrs. Donnelly personally handed this one to me. It has seen its fair share of blood, sweat, and tears, literally. This lanyard comes with a standard, and indoctrination is never part of that. If it is indoctrination to try to teach students empathy because kids are mean to each other, you can take this lanyard. It's a very hard one to teach because too many adults in this community act like bullies who are judgmental and not curious. If it is indoctrination to help students apply for college or scholarships, then empathize with them if they don't get either. You can take this lanyard. There are many failures in our lives, and we're all better off when a caring adult was there to help guide us. If it is indoctrination to sit with a student athlete who just got the news that an injury will keep them out the rest of the season, you can take this lanyard. Our students go through events like that are devastating, and we're there to help. If it is indoctrination to meet with students and guide them to being good people and good leaders in our school, you can take this lanyard. School culture plays a big role in how well a school functions, and student leaders play the biggest role of all. If it is indoctrination to listen to and comfort a student upon the death of a parent, teacher, or peer, you can take this lanyard. All those things have happened over the last 12 years. How do we think some of the students here will be able to deal with these situations if not for an adult in school and in their lives who they can trust? There are but a few examples. These are about a few examples of what our students bring to us daily. Instead of spreading an ignorant message based solely on national rhetoric, talk with the teachers.
3 minutes,
Come see.
Brandon.
Yep.
Thank you. Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Anderson. I've been teaching at the elementary school for 31 years. After watching last board meeting, I questioned why words like diversity, equity, and inclusion would be thought of in a negative term. We have 1,450 students. That's 1,450 learners, each coming to us with their own experiences, prior knowledge, and their own unique story to share. Please clarify tonight if the problem lies with those actual 3 words, or if you have specific examples from our Somerset classrooms that make you uncomfortable. As a teacher, diversity, equity, inclusion is not at all about dividing us in our classrooms. It's actually about bringing us together to learn, work, and play. I teach reading, math, science, social, and writing using many different approaches to 25, 7, and 8-year-olds every day. For some students, that may take an extra 2 or 3 lessons over time to grasp. We teach all. Our classroom welcomes and includes all different kinds of needs and backgrounds. This is where friendships are formed. Students' needs may be easy to see when you walk into a classroom, like a stand-up desk, a wheelchair, a communication device, or a picture board. There are many other needs that are met. They may need to stand, bike, or move while working. It may be an emotional need that you can't see, or a need to be enriched, a need to be structured and scheduled, or a need for a quiet space. There is definitely not one size fits all for my 25 learners. 25 kids at times have 25 needs, but we are a classroom where diversity, equity, and inclusion are all celebrated. If you decide those 3 words that you can't live with make you uncomfortable, no worries. We will still have amazing classrooms across our campus, no doubt. Each student from early childhood through our transition program will still have their unique background and their wealth of experiences that we can learn from and celebrate. Every child will have access to resources and support for their specific needs. Equity isn't about lowering standards, it's about elevating every student to achieve their best. We will continue to strengthen our school community by building community. When students see themselves represented and know their voices are valued, it will continue to create a culture of belonging. We are not only supporting the growth of each student while at the Somerset School District, but we're also preparing them to thrive in a world outside of our small community. Let's work together here at Somerset to create a community where not only every student, but every adult in our district feels valued, respected, and empowered to reach their full potential. We are all on the same team. Go Spartans.
Coulter.
Coulter White, 10300 City Walk Drive, Woodbury, Minnesota, High School Social Studies. I am curious where people think they are seeing DEI at Somerset schools, or if they could define what these programs look like. What signs of DEI in action do you see in our hiring practices? Are certain races of students getting preferential treatment? How does this program affect students and community members? My class did a project for Black History Month recently. Is this evil DEI at work? In my history class, DEI is amplifying voices that have not been typically heard throughout history and educating kids on the mistakes in our past that still have impacts today. These voices include white Americans of various backgrounds. No one is given higher grades, easier assignments, longer due dates, or any other perks based on their identity unless it is stipulated in an IEP. In history, it means we are looking for a more truthful and well-rounded version where all people are included, not a handful of politicians and elites. It is important to understand the causes of why DEI happens in the first place. Throughout history, various groups of individuals have been oppressed in this country. These groups have all shared one or more of the following obstacles to equal opportunity: lack of voting rights, lack of property rights, or lack of citizenship altogether. Even working and middle-class white men were unable to vote for many years in this country. Everyone should be able to agree that lacking these basic rights would be a setback to those it affected, and that those effects would linger into the future and should be addressed. Here are some groups who are helped by DEI initiatives that you may not know of. Even if it is not called by this name, the concept of equity is something we have always considered important in our government. The U.S. Senate is a perfect example of DEI. In this country, 2 of our major electorate systems are decided by population, the House of Representatives and the Electoral College. By these 2 measures, states with high populations would have the majority of the power to make laws and elect presidents. The Founding Fathers realized this and decided that to be equitable to smaller states, all seats in the upper house would be equally allotted regardless of population. For this reason, Wyoming, with a population roughly 18 times smaller than Los Angeles County, gets the same amount of senators as California. I'm guessing no one in this room wants to argue in favor of California having more control over lawmaking, so thank the Founding Fathers and their woke DEI initiative for that. Without it, Wisconsin and other smaller states would have a far softer voice in the Senate. DEI programs are a primary reason for employers to accommodate pregnant women and new mothers, and are also leading the charge to hold employers accountable to the Fair Labor Act, which regulates fair working conditions for all people. DEI has also helped advance the efforts of the ADA, which protects and helps and employ people with mental and physical disabilities. In fact, according to the FAA, one such initiative involving training people with disabilities in air traffic control positions was implemented in 2019 during the Trump presidency. DEI also helps our nation's cherished veterans. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, veterans who are disabled, who served on active duty in the armed forces during certain specified times, or in military campaigns are entitled to preference over others in hiring for virtually all federal government jobs. Also, according to the Associated Press, citing a military database confirmed by U.S. officials, the Pentagon has recently flagged over 26,000 photos of our American heroes as DEI propaganda to be removed. These include photos of the Tuskegee Airmen and pictures of soldiers whose crime was simply having the last name Gay. Acknowledging the shortcomings of the past and hearing from all voices is not one of the many problems we are facing in society today. It makes us a more aware and conscientious society.
Thank you. right, Becky and Britta.
Becky Olson, 940 192nd Avenue, New Richmond.
And then Britta Bergstrom Moen.
And we are here to talk about the production of Annie that took place this weekend. So this past weekend, our high school, with the addition of some middle school students, had a smashing performance of the musical Annie. And we had just a fantastic time. I break out in song, but you won't want to hear me sing.
Yeah, we had up to 50 students involved, middle school and high school, in the play, either acting, working on the set, or working on sound or lights.
And we just wanted to say that was our last performance in what we call the cafetorium. And we're not finding dry cheese on the floor behind the set. Looking forward to next year. So thank you for everybody that supported our new auditorium, and we can't wait to premiere our next show in the next school year. Thank you.
And David.
David Wallner, 494th Drive, Somerset, Wisconsin. My concern is, and I won't read the first 6 paragraphs of the email I sent out to all the board members. Thank you for the board members that did respond back to me. But I'm going to get right down to the base of my concern. As schooling is supposed to be non-political. Yes, we do have political classes to teach the differences and to push what each trains, or I'm going to say it, but it's not supposed to be political. The new policy of the WIA, in my opinion, is a very crafted piece of information, policy, that leaves the door open to be sued. In my opinion, the new WIA policy is not in compliance with Executive Order 14168, which puts us at risk of losing federal funding to our Wisconsin schools. The WIA and schools are supposed to be non-political, but the drafting of this policy appears to have been purposely crafted to open the door to the courts for arguments and using the threat of loss of funding to stir the populace against Executive Order 14168. To me, this is subversive, dangerous, and irresponsible. The United States was influenced by religious principle, in God we trust. We say it every meeting. Many Americans believe as such, and according to the oldest book in history, Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. This verse establishes that humanity was created in 2 sexes, male and female. As part of God's design, recognizing women are biologically distinct from men allows us to provide equal athletic opportunity for both sexes, clearly clarifying that women's sports are reserved for women. I see this not only with the WIA currently, but I see this through YouTube, as I'm hearing from some elderly people that there's fake news, yes, fake news, saying that our president's going to kill Social Security, kill Medicare. I mean, it's got to stop. And I recommend to the board is that you stand up and be leaders that we've elected you to, and write a letter to President Trump and tell them that you will not abide by the WIA policy. Or at least address the WIA first.
3 minutes, Dave.
And say
Thank you.
that you are incorrect, and this is
Thank you.
against the order 14168.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody who gave public comment. All right. Next topic is the building presentations by the principals.
Good evening, everyone. At the administrative level, at the building level, each of us principal have two funds that we use to run our buildings. We have Fund 10, which is fiscal year June 1 to July 31. That Fund 10 is classroom budgets, building supplies, common school funds, professional learning funds, and building maintenance. We also have a Fund 21, which is a rollover budget, where that's our activities accounts. That's where student councils come in, grade level money comes in. Any small grants that we get and anything, sometimes we get donations from people, that goes into the Fund 21. So at the elementary school, my overall budget for this school year is $110,233. In the spring of each year, I set my teacher budgets or my staff budgets of $34,090. And I do it where each teacher group kind of gets a pot, right? And they divide it how they need it, although I do adjust it throughout the year. The office of the principal, I have $23,000. What do I use that for? Building, I do birthday celebrations monthly with students. I've had guest speakers come in. When teachers been getting excited about something, I'll get them a professional book, additional classroom support if somebody needs something for a special projects, professional learning, office furniture, kind of staff school-wide incentives, things like that. JK registration we just had in February, and we do cookies and juice and little swag bags for the junior kindergartners. That comes out of there. Common school funds is overseen by Alex Bell, our library media specialist. It's $22,643. And then my building maintenance budget is $30,500. Working with Jim and Marshall and Brian, kind of my big focus this year is I'm looking to do some replacement of desks and chairs, things that are old and broken, and just I work with Jim, I meet with him monthly, what are the needs at the building level. Any questions about the elementary? Your next, Joe.
Excuse my voice today, but try to be loud enough so you can hear me. What you're going to see here is very similar with Pam, also laid out for you. Total budget for the building, $99,083. That first part there is our individual classroom teachers. That amount has stayed constant last year going into next year here. Things that they need specifically for their rooms and what they're teaching in their rooms. That's common school fund, much like Pam said. Brandon and Alex oversee a little bit of everything that happens in our LMC area because we don't have a person in our building. And so that fund, when they are saying, hey, we need something, we need to support a classroom this way, that's where that money goes to. Office of the principal, much like what Pam explained, those things that support our teachers, support things that come up, support our professional development, all those pieces that make school better for kids. Kind of like Pam alluded to there, at some point, does a teacher have a definite number? Yes. If teacher B doesn't have quite used their whole budget, can they help teacher A get a little something? Absolutely. So that's some of the flexibility where it says adjust as needed, and that would also come through the principal budget too. The maintenance piece down there, I meet with Jim probably every couple of weeks just because he's based in our building. One of the big things, obviously, we've talked about our middle school exterior gym doors, getting those replaced, getting those updated as a major need. Our building currently now has 3 master keys in it still from our initial renovation we did. So we have some work that would make our building more efficient to run. So he and I walked through what that might look like. And then we just talked about general building maintenance and looking at the pieces that make up our furniture that is now 4 going on 5 years old. What are some things that were great products? What are some things you might need to start replacing? What do we need in our classrooms to replace older stuff, bring things up to date, and then just general building maintenance. Walk around, we did a building walk. What are some things we can do to make our building pop when people walk in? We have some touch-up paint we need to do. It's just normal wear and tear. You walk to the middle school, every place in a wall or corners from here down is a little beat up because that's where they live. And they cut corners and bump into them. So things like that, when like mentioned, when we're working with Jim and his crew, that's what falls into general building maintenance there. Any questions you have for me in the middle Moving forward.
Thanks, Joe.
So high school, again, there's a lot of similarities between all the building budgets in terms of the overall grand scheme of them. At the high school level, our budgets are all based on the departments, so English has a set pot of money that's dedicated towards them, math, social studies, science, et cetera. Our CTE department, that's broken down into the different areas, so like art has their kind of pot of money. Woods, metals, they have their separate pots of money as well. And then food, so when you see the different numbers on there, you'll notice that our overall for our departments is a little bit higher than some of the other buildings because things like foods, metals, woods, those supplies are a little bit more than they would be at some of the other age levels. Our office, the principal budget, the bulk of that is spent on graduation, student incentives or student month, and celebration of excellence, which typically is at the end of the year, recognizes our top 10% of graduating seniors based on the low A system. And then obviously we have different needs that pop up from time to time. If there's something that we can support through the office budget for classrooms, whether that's materialistic or professional development opportunities, some of that might come from the office budget as well. And then building maintenance, our building probably gets quite a bit of use. All of our buildings get used, but with all of the different youth events and things that happen in our building, so with touch-ups and looking to replace furniture over years too, that's where a lot of that money comes in as well. Questions?
Yeah. All right. Now we're going to talk about our building goals, which you heard earlier this year, and we're going to give you a 90-day plan update. Yes. As you know, our elementary school building goal is to increase to 65% meeting or advanced as measured by the Wisconsin Forward. You know our third graders and fourth graders take the Wisconsin Forward, so our entire building, although our entire building is really committed to supporting these students as we increase our numbers of meeting or advanced students. Our 90-day plan for January through March. I've talked a lot about increasing our proficiency in the science of early literacy. And we're rounding it up, the top 10 teacher tools, right? So our 90-day plan this time was focused on teacher tool number 7 and focused on teacher tool number 8. Number 7 is fluency, and number 8 is writing in response to reading. I want to talk a little bit about what these tools are like. So teams sit or work with their PLCs. The tools are a combination of professional reading, a presenter on a screen, like a digital presenter, and then also videos showing these strategies at work in the classrooms. So as teachers are working through, they take their own personal notes, and at the end of the tool then, as teams, they work together to create an action plan. Now, I didn't want to give you a bunch of different slides, but hopefully you can see. So we have a shared doc where each grade level puts their commitment, so they come up with a commitment for each tool, and then they're able to log their reflection and their evidence on each tool. So they did that with tool 7, and they did that with tool 8. Then they do the work, they collect the data, and then we did something really fun this time. We kind of got into small groups. I call it Circle the Sage, but we got into small groups and went around and saw what each team was doing. And I want to show you a little bit of that because it was really cool to look at, and I know you're not going to be able to see this, but so let's talk first about oral reading fluency, or ORF, okay, another acronym for you. After our teachers had their intentional work around fluency, in kindergarten, for example, 100% of the students grew, that were below the 25th percentile, grew of an average of 26 sounds. Now don't get confused, wait a minute, there's only 26 letters in the alphabet, I know, but remember this is a 1-minute reading of sounds. So sounds will be repeated. How many letters can they read, say the sounds in 1 minute? So students grew 26 sounds, which is incredible. In first grade, 70% of the students grew more than 5 words per minute, okay? And then in third grade, 73% of the students increased their ORF score, their oral reading fluency score. We worked on really intentional and structured partner reading. How do I read with my partner so that we read more fluently? And remember, we start fluency work with accuracy, are we saying the right words? And we work on rate, how fast are we saying it? And then eventually we work on expression and those kinds of things. But we want to make sure we're not spending too much time worrying about what each word is. We want to make that very fluent, right? And moving ahead in our oral reading fluency. Then that second, tool 8, writing about our reading. I know you can't see this, but I wanted to show you. So there's a strategy a lot of teams use that's called JOT. And it stands for just 1, 2, or 3 words. So this is a kindergartner. Can you see this? This is their JOT. They're telling the beginning, the middle, of the end of the story in pictures. So they hear a story, they have to talk about what happened in the beginning, the middle, and the end. If you look at you're really not going to be able to see this, but I'm going to try to show you. Then a 4th grader, same strategy. They're thinking about a question, and you can see it up here, a question to go with their story, and then they have to answer it in just 1, 2, or 3 words to help build their comprehension of their reading.
Cam, do you want to pass that around?
I would love to.
Maybe the JOT one
Because I
too?
blacked out the names, so here we go. Another really cool thing is a strategy called SEED that I know 3rd grade did and I think other grades did. So SEED stands for, you start with a simple sentence and then you expand, you extend it, and then you decide, have I told what I need to tell? So this is a student, same student, who wrote before they had learned the SEED strategy, and then this is a student after they learned the SEED strategy. So their writing has increased, but it's not just writing more words, but it's writing more effective words. And I can't tell you, I know just because a lot of them are here, but I'm so proud of the work that we've been doing. We have 2 tools left, and it's like, I'm so excited about the professional conversations, the work that's been done, and the growth that we're seeing with our students. 2 of my teachers there, when they were sharing during our Circle the Sage activity, and we've really seen some really positive results at the elementary school. What questions do you have for me? I know it's incredibly hard to see that.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, everybody.
Again, building on our goal, we've been working to improve student engagement, build our vocabulary, skills, and the development area along with identifying key ideas and details so students can understand what they're being asked to do and dig in those details and come up with good, solid answers, or how do I go find that information that I need. One of the biggest things we continue to do, we opted in round 2 of our 90-day plan. Teachers continue to go out and observe other peers and then see what's going on in the classroom, look for engagement, not just compliancy in the room. One-to-one, face-to-face feedback, email feedback. As a whole, we accomplished that 82% of our teachers were able to get 2 of them done in that 90-day plan. A couple people didn't get all of them done. We had some things set up where teachers went to other buildings in our district to see comparable content areas. We had some teachers try to go to other school districts if we could make that work within their prep and stuff to see a lesson being taught for some of the people in our area that are deemed to be some of the best in the music area. For example, Rachel Erickson's trying to set something up, it didn't work out, we're going to still try to do that. The biggest thing to take away from that activity that we continue to do is, number 1, seeing the strengths of our peers. What are the people that I work with? What do they do? What are they good at? What do I see a kid doing in their room that maybe I don't see in my room? How can I connect with them? How can I get to them and bring those skills into my room and apply them in what I'm teaching? Building on that adult learning piece so we can use our expertise in the building. We built in some professional development from within, meaning that during some staff meetings, we had leaders in their building. When I say leaders, I put it out there and people said, yes, I want to teach that to my peers. And so we had 2 opportunities where we had kind of a round table, 4 rooms, where different teachers were set up and they were showing off what they did in as far as here's how I work on vocabulary development, here's how I try to get at key ideas and detail identification, throwing out my resources, giving those things to other staff members they might not see in action, and then some really great professional discussions with some depth of talking about student successes, student struggles, teacher successes, teacher struggles, and how can I take some of that stuff back to my classroom and morph it into what I can use or tweak what I'm doing. We collected a whole bunch of data related to that last piece there about what do we implement. It's not hard numbers, like I can't tell you 70% did this, right? We're not there yet. We're in the process of, as we move from this plan to our next, evaluating the success individually of the student. What we're able to do is create a resource for every content area that has, here's what we use in ELA, here's what we use in math, here's what we're doing in science, and it's available for everyone to take a peek at, click on links, adapt it to what you might want and what works. And so we have a really good, I would say, foundation of things that staff can now apply in their classrooms. Some of the things coming out of that, especially in the area of the vocabulary, highlighting that one, staff are intentionally creating some opportunities when kids walk in and citing events, how they're kicking off lessons. And they're bringing that skill of vocab development or identification of those key ideas and details into their teaching intentionally versus let's just see how they figure it out and do it on their own to push that. When the foundational and study skill development, some people have taken where we went with what they've learned and created processes for how kids are taking notes and how they can go and use that resource in the future, because that's not a really strong study skill in middle school. It's like, well, I wrote it down, I'm good. And so we're starting to see more and more kids in our classrooms go back and look at those resources they're creating and building on daily in the room as a reference versus always, yeah, we want to ask the teachers for help, but hey, I have something in front of me I can use. And where can I go to find some of that information? And obviously, like we've been doing, content review and extended learning opportunities as well. Different things people are doing in their classrooms to obviously, hey, where we do, where we're at, but hey, where can you take this? And so, like I said, I don't have any hard numbers like Pam had, but man, we are doing some really great things that we're seeing kids start to use skills more frequently than we did at the start of the year. Questions you may have for me?
Thanks, Joe.
So for the high school, we had 2 building goals when we started out the year here. Our first goal was that all students would show growth on state and local assessments as it relates to reading, writing, and interpretation by at least 5%. So as we've gone through our school year here, we have some baseline data and some progress that we can measure up with that. Especially as you look at for our 10th and 11th graders, they have prior data marks from last year on the pre-ACT Secure. Our 9th graders coming in, their state assessment, they took the forward, but we didn't have that comparable at the high school yet, which we will here in the spring. It's just some early findings that I want to highlight with that. So when we took the practice ACT here this school year, and our 11th graders take the ACT tomorrow, 9th and 10th grade take the pre-ACT Secure in April, but our 9th and 11th graders were above benchmark in both math and ELA compared to the Wisconsin benchmark. So that's pretty remarkable. We're pretty happy with that. Obviously, we're not satisfied, so we've been continuing to push with that. Our 10th grade was above the benchmark for Wisconsin in math, and we were 0.2 off the benchmark in ELA. So we're right there. That's from the practice run that we did in the fall. And again, with that, that's first opportunity taking it. We've had 4.5 months now of instruction since then. When we took that, kids were taking that as a practice run without the accommodations that they would have if they have accommodations when we take this in the spring here. As it relates to some of the local measurables that we're looking at with reading, writing, and interpretation, we asked our core areas to identify different assessments that we can use to help track progress throughout the year. But specifically with the practice 10th grade, again, we have the comparable from them taking the pre-ACT Secure last year to measure with what they took in the fall here to give a more apples to apples comparison. Their reading composite was up by 0.61 as a composite. Their science interpretation sub-score was up by 5.33%. And then in 11th grade, the overall composite in reading went up from last year where they took it as 10th graders to this year in the fall, up by 1.14 as a composite. Science interpretation grew 13.66%. And then in math, integrating essential skills was up 18.21% for our current 11th graders. And those kids, again, get set to take the ACT tomorrow. Fastbridge, they took that in the fall. We just took it here in the winter. And we'll have a true measure of our growth on that in the spring when they take that later on in the school year. So we will report back out on that in the summer to get a true measurement on that. And then one thing that we did here in the winter is with our core areas in math and in English, each of the departments had a template on reflections that they did to really go through their mid-year assessments to identify what trends were you seeing. Are there specific skills as a group that we are identifying that we need to put more time and energy into that? Are there specific kids that they took a dip and we need to maybe look to the why and get them into some interventions? So those are things that we did mid-year here. Each department has a data warehouse. I'm going to pull this. Maybe not. Quick request access. Sorry about that.
That's okay, I can need to.
So what I'm going to put up on the screen here, this is a template of what we use internally within our building to help keep a measure on our student progress throughout the year. So this is just an 11th grade, for example. We have this for 9th and 10th as well. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are blacked out here because those would have been student names and student scores, so we need to protect that privacy. But as you can see throughout the year here, we've got multiple data points. So for A reading, for our 11th graders, we've got the fall, winter. For reading, we're able to take what they took last year, what they had last year as 10th graders on their reading sub-score. We've got their practice score dialed in, and then we've got what their predicted score is here on the spring. So then we can measure that. We've got it conditionally formatted with colors to know kind of, okay, are we seeing growth with them? When we have this here, if they're in green here and they took a step backwards, that's good information for us to look at and make adjustments. With writing in particular, a couple ways that we're measuring that. The English department has an internal writing assessment that they've developed over the course of several years. We've seen really good results with our writing scores over years. So we've got 2 data points with that. We'll have a third one here in the spring. Social Studies does a writing assessment as well now that they've collaborated with our English team to have a common understanding that's more social studies driven. And then with interpretation, I asked science and math as a building leadership team, we worked to identify, okay, what parts of the pre-ACT secure and ACT would really help us address interpretation. Well, with science, there's a subcategory that is literally interpretation, so that gives us some data points there. So for our 11th graders, we have their 10th grade scores from last year on the pre-ACT secure, their practice run here, and then after we get our scores back in about a month or so, we can plug that in to get a true measure over multiple data points, what we're seeing. And then finally with social studies has a skills assessment for interpretation, and then math, integrating essential skills, and then modeling are the areas that we've used with math with that as well. So just to kind of give you a glimpse into one way that we're looking at this to monitor with our state assessments and then department assessments that are relative to the specific building goal there. Then just some things that I want to highlight that we've been doing instructionally as well and within our building. You've heard me reference it several times in previous presentations and again today, but with our practice ACT, having a lot of individual conversations and class meetings to help our kids understand the importance and what all goes into that. Something that we felt like we maybe haven't done the last couple of years a good enough job on is just articulating them the why and how things fit into that. We took dedicated time in our advisories this year over the course of several weeks where each kid sat down with their advisory teacher and went through a detailed score report, identifying what their scores were, setting goals, and asking them to reflect on that as well. So those personalized conversations, I think just hearing from our adults and from kids, it was really eye-opening to see like, okay, I didn't necessarily know as a kid maybe what went into some of those scores or what was considered a good score. So helping educate as much as possible. One thing that we identified with our ninth graders coming in is that in middle school, the Wisconsin Forward is spread out over several days, and there's not a time component, where with the pre-ACT Secure and ACT, there's that time component. So incorporating those opportunities into our day-to-day classes. I was in a math classroom a week ago, and the teacher put a certain time on the board and gave them some sample problems to work through so they can get used to that pacing. So we're seeing more and more of those things infused in. Our English department identified, hey, our kids are really struggling right now, or could use some work on unfamiliar reads. So getting those in front of kids, so it's something they're maybe not familiar with, where they have to then interpret and pull out key ideas and main concepts. We're seeing a lot of collaboration, and the next couple bullet points covers that, but I'm just gonna summarize it by saying our English and social studies team really working together on reading and writing assessments to have common language. That's kind of the starting point. And then the goal is to expand that into our other content areas coming up. This year we've had several opportunities for our teachers in grades 5 through 12 to have what we call vertical alignment meetings. So I'll just use our science team for example. They're able to get together with the middle school team, and they've done that several times over professional learning days and other trainings to identify, okay, what standards or what topics are being taught when, and how can we set our kids up for success coming through the system, so that way, you know, in ninth grade, when we're covering a topic, maybe we're realizing now, hey, this particular topic, they haven't seen it since the beginning of 8th grade or in 7th grade, and we need to address that so our kids are ready for assessments. That's just a specific example with that. Our English and math and science teams have done intentional work with CISA on aligning the ACT to Wisconsin standards to see where that fits. So again, identifying where are gaps that maybe kids haven't been as best prepared, and where can we fill those gaps as we're getting ready for assessments. And one thing we did start this second semester is independent reading time during advisory on Tuesdays. So we start our day every day, 15 minutes in advisory. Every Tuesday, kids are able to bring a book from home. They had chances to go check out a book from the library if they didn't have one, where it's 15 minutes of uninterrupted time to help build sustained focus and develop reading skills. Pretty proud of the fact that we have not had that interrupted, with the exception of last week Tuesday. We had to pull the 11th graders out so we could give them ACT information for this week. Otherwise, every Tuesday this semester we've been able to have that uninterrupted. Tomorrow will be the second time when the juniors are taking ACT and 9th and 10th graders are at home. So if you're listening, 9th and 10th graders, make sure you get reading in tomorrow. And then finally, the last two things I would want to talk about is our Spartan Time organization, how we've kind of shifted that into the second semester here. So that is our intervention time at the end of the day. We're able to be very fluid with our placements with that. So we took a multifaceted approach to that. So our students that are in our target group, which is a component of our state report card score, we identify who are the kids in our target group, and then what are their needs for intervention. So we've built that. So like our English teachers, they have their target group kids on certain days of the week, so they can focus on just specific skills for that particular group. Then on other days of the week, they have the opportunity then to request to fill in their other 3 days of the week for kids that they're identifying, maybe not in a target group, but based on what I'm seeing in class, they need some additional support, or we want to push some certain kids further based on what we're seeing, so bringing that classroom component in. And then the third way we filled our Spartan Times is based on student feedback. So kids had the opportunity to fill out a form heading into the semester, so we used their feedback to get them placed with teachers that they wanted to. The nice thing about that is it's very fluid. So very recently, our social studies team is doing interventions for Wisconsin Forward coming up in April. The social studies team identified, hey, these kids have met their exit criteria. They're able to get out, so we send out that list to the teachers. Hey, these kids are now available, and here are the day they're available. Does anybody need them for something in class for an intervention? If the answer is yes, we put the kid there. If not, then I go and find the kid. Hey, congratulations, Mr. Wallen does not need you for intervention. You've met your criteria to be moved out. Who would you like to go with for Spartan Time now? Because you're meeting all the other criteria. So then they get that voice then to go where they need to for intervention. And then the final thing here is just some of the supports that we've done with the ACT this year. We had an ACT prep workshop where we had over 30 kids choose to participate on a day off of school to come in through Mastery Prep to help get ready for the ACT. And then our counselors, Mrs. Colling and Mrs. Stovig, ran a Spartan time group on Thursday afternoons to help our kids prepare for the ACT. And then our second building goal, by June 2025, 80% or more students will feel that their classmates respect each other. This was an intentional goal, intentional number based on what we saw last year from our students, on feedback from them of where they felt like the level of respect was amongst the building. So these 90 days, this most recent 90 days, we spent a lot of time getting feedback from our kids on what are your feedback or definitions of the SHS way? Because as adults, we've said, okay, trustworthiness, respect, citizenship, but we wanted to get voice from the kids to see through their lens, what does that look like and what does that mean? Adults have done work on it, now we wanted a kid voice so we can start to dial that in and hone that in even more. We also asked them for examples. So for example, when is a time that you've seen someone display respect in the building? What does it look like to be respectful in the building, to get their insights? Our multi-tiered support system, that groundwork is being laid this school year for our behavior solutions team, which is district-wide, that'll carry into next year. We met with each grade level to give them the information on the climate, culture, and belonging data that they took in the fall. You know, we have that information as adults, but it really doesn't do us any good if the kids don't see that, to see where they landed on it and can kind of give them an understanding. And then finally, we ran a handful of adjusted schedules so far this semester where we were able to have class meetings, and then also, while some of those class meetings were going on, other grade levels had different class activities going on where they were able to build some community and interact with each other. Mrs. Whipke, our assistant principal, did a great job of planning those activities for the kids, so that was something new we hadn't done before. You can't really accomplish that in 15 minutes, so we ran some lengthened advisories with that.
I have some questions. Can you go back to goal number 1? Unless you guys have something else. Good? Can you go back to goal 1? So I guess in terms of the high school, I know the last time we did an update, there was some questions like what exactly are we doing, right? It was kind of an overall, just kind of broad statements about growth. And we saw in that presentation that growth is not an achievement, isn't on par with elementary and middle school. So when I look at this, I see a whole lot of data. And I see that we're tracking these scores, but I'm curious, like, what exactly is happening when there is a drop? And then when I look at this, I see a lot of focus on 11th grade. I mean, ACT, how many times is it listed there? As you know, I recently requested some information because I now have some personal experience with the high school. In 9th grade science, in first semester, the average grade was a C+. And that's super concerning for me when you have that's the start of the high school experience. And I don't see anything in here, like, what exactly are we doing to combat that? Because I get the ACT is important, and I get that this, the tracking statistics is important. But when we got a 9th grade median score of C+ in science, I'm concerned. And as a board member, if there's things that we can be doing to help that, I want to know, and I'm not seeing that here. So do you have anything specific that you're doing at the grade level, specifically?
Yeah. So I would, great question. So I think a couple things that come to mind with that is, one thing, and I referenced this a little bit earlier, is our vertical alignment, because we're identifying some of the skills or topics that are maybe being taught when they're being taught. Hey, some of these we need to be refreshing and hitting earlier now. So some of that, I think, has been critical for us. Last week on Friday, we had CISA in to work with our entire science team, because I don't believe it's always just one particular grade level or one particular class. Sometimes that might be the case, but again, to have that broader view, where we had our 512 science teachers working together with CISA. So that's a couple of examples with that.
Okay, and then you talked about doing kind of observation at neighboring districts of teachers that are really excelling. Do you do anything similar to that with high school staff?
So we did not have that written into a specific goal for us as a building. I have had some of our teachers do that either across the building or across the district at different times too. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I just add to about the median grade, right? I don't have it sitting in front of me, but one question I would have is what has been the academic history of that cohort? Mm-hmm. So it may be concerning, it may be kind of right on par, but kind of bleeds into what you're saying of like, okay, so what are we doing about it, right? How are we addressing it? So it's like there's probably a few other components there that kind of bleed into that, but
Yep, and when I look at this, I see we want to increase, obviously, right, 100%. But what's good enough, right? And I guess I would say if we don't have an A, median grade of an A, like then we're failing somewhere, right? And maybe that's extreme. I understand that, but I want to know. And when I hear this, as a board member, I want to know we have high standards. It's not just to see a little bit of increase. Like let's make a huge jump to get to where we need to get to. So.
And
Just
Chairman, so when Trent referenced the vertical alignment stuff, as far as you're speaking of science, like we're looking at our rotation of how we loop and what's going to be first or last for 8th grade. So to create a better transition to support that foundation is fresher as they jump into what they're going to have as a freshman versus how we've done it for some years. So part of that, I think, is built into what we're working on 512. That the middle school is going to intentionally look at doing that'll help set kids up for a better foundation as they jump into the high school. Would add to, I think, part of your answer there, Tim.
Okay. Thank you, I appreciate that.
I would piggyback off of that, and thinking this might answer some of your questions on that, is that that's work that we've been doing with our math department now for a few years, and we've started to see some of that increased achievement that we're all going for, right?
Yep.
We all want to be achieving at high levels, right? So we've seen the benefits of that with our math department, and we're getting there with our science department now too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to actually comment when Joe brought it up, but just one of the things I remember asking for kind of the last go around is what do we do from the winter forward exams? How does that change things in our schools or our advisor? And I just make a comment that I just know personally, in my personal experience, my son brought in, why do I have to doing math now more in advisory than I've had to do all year long? And I was happy to hear that this was just recently that had changed from, just obviously something happened at that transition point. Okay, now you're doing this. So I know I asked for it last time, what are we doing different? Well, I'm living it, yeah, that's why. Sorry, you're doing math because we brought it up. Like, that's what has to happen. So, but again, we asked, just as something we asked for an update on, and I guess I'm seeing it in real time from experience as a parent that yes, they're bringing other things are different now than they maybe were before Christmas. So I just wanted to.
And I would say because this came up at the board level, I think I'm hoping these presentations have been helpful to kind of bring to life in a little bit deeper way than we have in the past of kind of what's happening right along the way. And seeing lots of good growth, and obviously never perfect, so we're still working on those things too. But if there's something else beside kind of what you see here, don't be afraid to reach out to me and say, okay, the next time they give this presentation, this also might be helpful, that kind of thing, because we want you to have good information. But this is certainly more in depth than we've ever probably provided, which hopefully you find helpful. So.
I have one question.
Thank you.
Practice ACT benchmark, you're talking state benchmark, is that like meets expectations or is it like an average?
So the state of Wisconsin sets a specific benchmark score where they say kids in 9th grade, 10th grade, or 11th grade should be in math or in ELA. So we are above that score in everything except, what did I say, was 10th grade ELA, we were off by 0.2. That doesn't, are you asking does that equate to a meet expectations score on the report card, or
Yes, which sounds like it kind of does, but I just wondered if it
What
was
the
an
pra-
average
what-
in a state.
Yeah, what the practice ACT will do is give you kind of a predicted score, right? And so, right now, what Trent
Give
is
us an
sharing
actual
is that
score,
it gives
not
you
a
the
predicted.
score and then a predicted, and so that he is saying that this is where the state says the kids should be at this given time,
That
and they're
moment in
above
time.
that at that moment in time. So,
Thank you.
I do have one more question just about the budget piece, and maybe it's a better question for Dave. But I was tracking the building maintenance, so there's 79,000 budgeted for kind of essentially all 3 buildings. What are we doing about the larger scale projects and kind of anticipation? Where does that fall in budget, and what's the plan? Because it's kind of out of the realm of you guys, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like we just experienced at the elementary school.
That's a great question.
Hi, Dave. Yay.
Great question, great transition. We're back into budget stuff, so that's fantastic. I heard budget stuff earlier, and I was like, well, it's my turn right now.
No.
A lot more. So, you asked about maintenance components of each of the buildings. That actually is also within, when you see quarterly reports, the B&G department, those numbers are also found within that department. So it's one of those areas where it's a combined responsibility and a combined dollar amount. And you asked about longer term, we have to work on our capital maintenance plan. That's something that Jim has kind of started on. We've had initial discussions about that. Tim was also, prior to Jim, Tim was also working up to it a little bit. After the referendum in 2019, that kind of took care of a lot of the things that were on our plan. And now we've had another referendum and some more work. And those things kind of also have taken precedent a little bit. But that is something that we'll circle back to. Prior to the referendum in 2019, prior to the first one, we had an ongoing capital projects plan. And we would address those as we could year over year. The last, I guess, 13 or 14 years since I've been here, we haven't necessarily had a discretionary capital maintenance set aside in the budget for that. We kind of address it as we can each year. If we have a warm winter, if there's little snow removal, if we are saving money on heating and electricity, then in the springtime there's some opportunity to take care of some of these things within the longer term forecast on maintenance needs. But I would also say that's been greatly reduced by the referendum work we've had the last two rounds.
Okay.
Thank you, Alicia, for navigating to the business services page. I like to go here just so you can see where to go to look at the things that we talk about. I'll start with the financial reports first, go through the quarterly report briefly. These are all the budget actual reports since I've been here. All right, time scrolling here. So here we are, the quarter 2 budget actual.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
So same format as all the other reports. This is expenditures and revenues, mainly in the general fund discussion here, through December, the end of December, that's quarter 2 of the fiscal year. And all the general fund numbers that we talk about on the expenditure side, we're excluding the transfer to Fund 27. So this is all just Fund 10 numbers. And we compare to prior year. We look at the current percent expended in this year compared to the unexpended budget. We compare that to the prior year amounts expended and the actual total. So instead of the budget this year, it's the total from last year. So that way we kind of see percentage-wise, are we on track similar to how we ended last year to see if we're on a similar track this year. And I shouldn't say that, again, these are all very similar. You've probably seen a lot of these before. I show all the percentages of where we are in the year, the fiscal year, the school year, the payroll year, and so forth. So they can compare that to some of the expenditures. All these are in summary format. We start with function. This is where expenditures are made. These numbers also show up on a monthly basis in the school board, linked to the agenda, summary documents, a couple notes about why some percentages are higher than others and such. This is the same information graphically compared to budget. Budget on top, the actual through December on the bottom there. More graphically compared to prior year. Then we talk about object a little bit. This is what is expended. So previously the function, summary function was where, this is what. And you'll also see, you'll notice, I'm sure in the monthly board packets, there's a summary code discussion at the beginning of the budget actual report that kind of talks about what each of the codes, what kinds of things are found in those codes. So you can refer to that also. Closer examination, we like to look at various things that have come up over the years. This has gotten longer over the years. We compare where we're at compared to prior year. For whatever reason, if it was maybe way over budget or way under budget the prior year, or it's something that we'd like to focus on, like I mentioned, if gas and oil and electricity are all low, that gives us a little leeway in the spring to do some maintenance projects some years. So that's why some of these things are on here. You can see the B&G department, IT department, CIA department, transportation, sub wages. I have a little bit of commentary for all these. And a lot of it comes down to timing for like some of the tuitions. It's really, the billing that we get billed can be different year to year. The IT and curriculum budgets, those percentages can vary year over year based on when purchases are made, when the cash outlays are made. I think you heard from Sarah's budget presentation about some of the IT concerns, because they're buying things every year, hardware and such, and so they're ramping that up and trying to get that going, trying to get good prices for the rest of the year. So IT, CIA, the percentages don't matter as much right now because they will always come in and end up on budget historically. That's what we expect. So it's really timing based for some of these things.
Dave, just quick, anything on those that are out of alignment from what they normally are at this point of the year?
Well, snow removal is low again because we had a little bit in December, but not invoiced for it. That's also a really small budget number, so it's not as big a deal. But obviously, as you look at this, you say, oh, well, gas, mill for heat, that's exceptionally low. Snow is low. Electricity is low on percentage basis. All these things, we know that since December, it's gotten snowier and colder, so these things will catch up a bit. We'll see how it goes from there. I think the big picture, as you look at this, the big takeaway is we're on budget, we're under budget through December. Things are looking good through December. But like we talk about every year, we will find items that are under, and we'll find items that are over, and it's all kind of how does it work out and shake out in the end. Do you have anything specific?
No, I was just kind of getting a general feel there.
So again, some notes about the chart up above, some of the things we talk about a lot. Here's the HRA. Based on a percentage basis, we're on schedule through December compared to the prior year. Actually, we're on a very similar percentage basis for our total budgetary expenditure, but that can vary. That can vary even as the year goes by, where we'll end up. Special ed, very similar to last year so far on a percentage basis there. Revenues, this is where I discuss a little bit the types of revenues, the big revenues that the district has, what we rely on, the cash flow timing. All those things were similar to last year on schedule. There's not a lot of variance. And obviously one of the bigger ones is at the end of the year with open enrollment. Here's the cash flow timing. Here's month by month. You can see the dips while expenditures were pretty steady. Here's the cumulative. You can see the gap that gets made up once tax receipts come in January, February. And then the summary here. This is where essentially what I just said to answer your question, Bruce. We're on budget, we're possibly a little under budget, but we also know like this is through December. So always the first one, we'll see how we progress throughout the year. So I ran through that quick. If there's any questions, great. Otherwise, I'll jump into the process presentation where there's some screenshots of this as well. So that's on the main business services page, process presentation. I will just work through here. You can obviously, pull it up full screen on your computer if you like. And this is, I made this just to kind of highlight what do we talk about, what do you see on an ongoing basis, what should you be looking for as a school board, what should you be thinking about, what do we talk about, why is it important, budget, oversight, forecasting, review, what do those things look like, how do we see it, how do we tell what's what. This is a screenshot of the code summary descriptions that I talked about just a few minutes ago. This is attached every month to the budget actual report. I kind of tie together through a few slides, just color coding. This is green for revenue codes, and I have some blue for object and red for function. Those are expenditure codes. Just so you can kind of see like what's what that you see on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis or whenever you might see these things. Again, here's a couple of the monthly reports, screenshots where I have the title of the report, I have a star next to it, and this does show up a lot better if you have it on your own personal device. And then I have the color coding, so you can see, just as examples, Many of these screenshots are from a few years ago now. At this point, I didn't update these for this, just because they illustrate the point and where you would find the current information. Here's some more monthly reports with the titles and the various types of code and expenditure and/or revenue you would see in those reports. There's a revenue, it's green. Here's the quarterly reports. We just looked at this by function, red, by object, blue. That's where the expenditure is made, what the expenditure is. Revenues in green. Again, we just looked at an example of this in the quarterly report. This is an older screenshot as well. It's an example of the budget hearing every September. Prior to the hearing and publication in the newspaper is a summary budget. And then at the meeting, we look at the detailed budget. And so this is just an illustration of this whole section here sums to this point, and that's just one line item in the summary that's in the paper. So we see the summary, then we see the detail at the meeting. This is how these things tie together, and this is how they're all referenced, what they all mean. It's all codes, and it all is consistent on an ongoing basis, code-wise. Monthly cash flow chart. This shows cash position. That's information only. Here's our timeline. This is also in the September budget hearing, and it's year over year. It's the same things. It's a cycle of budget preparation and execution and follow-up. And I have additional documents you can look at on the Business Services website that explain a lot of this stuff too. This is the time of year when I'm trying to update more of those from last year. So major expenditure items. They could be discussion items for administration, for the board. Personnel is our biggest one. Contracted services, that's actually a big one for us too, because we contract out our transportation, our custodial, our food service. Not every district does that, so that's a bigger chunk of our budget compared to others. Physical plant, maintenance, capital projects. And then I think, some of our presentations, especially the B&G one, we talk in advance, we try to kind of illustrate that there's a difference between what a lot of the fixed costs are and whether there's any discretionary spending or not. A lot of times that ends up being, how is the year going? Can we spend some things on some projects that are needed, or do we have to wait? Because there's not a lot of discretionary in our current budget. Major revenues. Just discussion items for administration and board. We'll talk about revenue limit versus not revenue limit. This is an illustration. This is an old revenue limit worksheet. Just to pull out, again, I included it to show where the membership count is used in the formula, where you start with a revenue per member, you multiply it by whatever the increase is, and then you get your new revenue. This is the formula, and the revenues that you get your state aid, the district gets the state aid, and then the rest is levy, if you're using it to the full extent, which we are. So major revenues within that revenue limit are affected by the 3-year average membership. This is updated, so this is 24-25 here. And this is our revenue per member increase and our total revenue limit since 06-07. As you can see, there's times when there's no increase. And decrease. The last 2 years has been 325 per year. And now we're waiting for the next budget. So major revenues from a non-revenue limit perspective. Some of these will mesh with when there's no increase on the revenue limit. Some of these, the per pupil aid, for instance, which is outside of the revenue limit, might increase in funding in a given year, but it hasn't increased on a per member basis for a few years now. But it is a significant revenue for us. It's over $1 million annually. And then here's our open enrollment revenue. So this is for the students coming here. Revenues. So process review. We have the monthly and quarterly reports. We have our annual budget, department and building reports. We do some projects. We do some as needed. An example of that would be if there were capital projects that were becoming timely. We did have some additional discussions when we were talking about going to one-to-one, for instance, and that started at the curriculum IT budget presentation for their department. So process review external, the annual financial audit, you see kind of timeline process, what's done, why is it important, what are the takeaways. This is where I mentioned at the previous meeting when the auditors were here, the findings. If you look at the report on federal and state awards, which is the single audit on pages 10 and 11 this year, you will see the material findings, which is what you should look at as a school board. What are the findings? And so this year, we have the same 2 material findings as every year and as pretty much every district our size. We don't have enough staff in the business office to properly separate all tasks so that we can control for all actions. And we don't create our own financial statements. We have bigger till we do that. So those are the 2 material findings we get every year, and we would need to increase staff on multiple positions to eliminate those. Many districts don't create their own financial statements, but that is a finding. There is an additional significant deficiency on page 11 that I wanted to talk about, and Sheehan touched on it a little bit when she was here. When we reduced the budget by 1.4 million, we kind of, some positions weren't filled, we consolidated some tasks, and a couple of things we did was we changed who is giving information to another staff member, and then who is using that information to submit the reporting to the state. And when we looked at it, we thought this is the same, this is functionally the same, there's still a second set of eyes, there's still review happening by supervisors and signing off online through the portal, all these things. But when they went through all the documentation, they said, you know what, that's not good enough. You have to go back to how you did it before. And that, I would say, is a good conversation. So we are doing it how we did it before now. We had another conversation that's not a finding, that's not a deficiency, that's very similar related to food service claiming. Because again, we tightened up that process. We tried to make it more efficient while having the same level of review. And they said, no, we prefer that you actually go back to how you're doing it before and or add a different step. And that is a positive conversation. And that's what we look at the auditors to give us. How do we make our work better? How do we get a good result with our limited resources? So this is what you should be looking at in the financial statements. This is a reference to say what is in the slideshow, and that's the Business Services website. So I ran through that real quick. Let me know if you have some questions.
When will we plan to review, any 25, 26 adjustments or changes? That's roughly about this time. We always kind of talk about where we think the
audit
budget.
related?
No, just the budget for next year. Like, usually we talk about if we got to make any big changes with.
Factors, yep. So this is one of those 2-year cycle, we're waiting to hear more about the state budget. We've heard what the governor has proposed, we've heard what DPI has proposed. Now we need to wait and hear what it's going to be in reality. That is our biggest component for what our revenues look like, and then from that we build out our expenditures if there's any change. Going into that, if we're status quo with just state statute as it is now, which is $325 per member on the revenue limit, and the same special ed reimbursement, which are 2 biggest factors up for discussion, then we will make do. There's no need to cut, there's no need to reduce, but it's going to be tight again. It's going to continue to be tight. So we're waiting to see what information we're going to get from the state. We have various projections, but it's not worth a whole lot until we know more.
So I guess even with we're technically over budget this year. So even with that, you would be comfortable going into next year with that same budget and not going over next year though?
Well, we won't know yet. We're not at a point where we're going to know if we're going to be over or not. I think it's reasonable to say it could be similar, it could be under, or it could be tight. And if there's no additional revenues of any sort, That'll be a much less generous compensation discussion, which is always the biggest component of what we talk about year over year.
I guess I just remember last time we were going into this cycle, you know, we met and made substantial reductions.
Yeah, I
Is
think
that something we have to
the
look?
additional components from that were the ESSER funding and the
Okay.
lack of like state revenue limit per pupil increase.
Okay.
So we knew that that was done, right? We used that for operations in lieu of state funding, but that was also a one-time thing. So that in combination with some of the expenditure side information building over time where we don't change, we don't reduce if class sizes or overall population reduces, it was much more clear that we had to reduce at that point, regardless of what the state did. So now we're kind of status quo at the moment, and we'll see what happens.
So you recommend we wait until, is that gonna be an October thing again, or, you know, we don't?
It's supposed to be by June, by the end of June.
Okay.
So I'm optimistic that we'll know, hopefully in the near future.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions for Dave? All right, then we'll move on. Thanks, Dave. All right, then we'll move on to the superintendent report. Shannon.
Great. Why don't I start with Jesse Thorson's memo? Hopefully you all received that. Jesse is making a recommendation for an additional long-term sub-paraprofessional, essentially for the months of April and May through the end of the year. She put some pretty detailed information about the why, having some unplanned increased needs in our elementary school, supporting our students with IEPs. Provided some information about hours per day, and the last paragraph discusses she has carryover funds from Fund 27 that specifically can only be used for certain things, and staffing is one of them. So it's money she's had left over from previous years that she hasn't spent yet. So it wouldn't cost any money out of Fund 10. She can cover it through current budget and her carryover.
That'll come back next.
Yep, tonight's just the first reading. If you read it and have questions, you can reach out certainly to Jesse or myself. So that'll come back in March. So thank you for adding that in. CISA contract. So every year at this meeting, we put in front of you our proposed CISA services. So this looks identical to the services that we had last year. Over the course of multiple years, very little has changed. Typically, some things that may change might be some of our services that we contract for, such as audiology, deaf and hard of hearing, vision, for example, just depending on if we have those needs in our district or not. So if you have any questions, happy to answer. Otherwise, this will also come back at the next meeting for formal approval.
I have a question.
Yep.
What's all included in the comprehensive consulting networking services for?
Yep, so that might be if we, depending on certain trainings that we might send staff to, sometimes if we have someone come here on site and do some training.
Okay.
What is healthy, safe, and respectful schools?
So different programming, again, they might have some trainings that our staff might go to. It could be supporting economically disadvantaged students. It could be school safety. It's kind of a catch-all for every year. They might have different offerings that fall into that category that they offer for trainings and things like that for staff to come to.
And do you have a breakdown, I don't need it tonight, but do you have a breakdown of like how many times in a school year we use these particular services?
Yep, so at the end of, well, actually, we just got a recent one too, but, yep, so CISA sends reports so we can see how many staff we have going per month, per year.
Are you able to share that?
Yep, I can mark that down. We'll track it down. Yep.
And then my last question.
Yep.
The things that are not on here for renewal, if you needed this service, can you pay for like a one-time use?
Yep, so not uncommon that if a school year started and, for example, we didn't have audiology checked and we had a student move in that needed the service, I simply send a message to their superintendent, their director, and we get it added on.
Do you have a report of like, if that has happened?
I
Have
can
we
tell
used a
you-
service that we don't subscribe to?
I can tell you it has happened, probably every year. The frequency, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But yes, it happens. It's not uncommon.
Thank you.
Other CISA questions? All right, then I'm going to move up. I'll be here a while, so. Okay, so kind of one of two what I would consider bigger things I want to talk about tonight. So the first one, bringing you some information regarding some research that we've been doing for multiple months internally. Just looking into advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons of potentially bringing in an all-day junior kindergarten programming to the district. So I want to be really clear for obviously you guys, but anyone listening. No recommendations are being made tonight, no decisions have been made. This is really just to kind of bring you into the loop of what have we gathered so far, conversations that we've been having, certainly answer any questions that you have, and I'll talk about some next steps when we're done here. So this has really kind of been the basis of our conversation. So currently we offer half-day junior kindergarten, and then we've been talking about what might it look like if we potentially offered full day, and what might it look like if we offered more of a hybrid version of still maintaining a half-day option for parents that think that that's maybe what they want for their child, versus also offering an all-day component. So this has kind of been the basis of our research. Just to give you a little bit of history, so looking at our JK numbers for the last couple of years, you've heard me talk quite a bit about this year in particular, down some from where it's been. This is not abnormal. This seems to be on track with districts around us for this year in particular. We just had JK registration, so we had almost 70 students sign up, which is a good start. We know that more typically, historically, will end up enrolling by the time fall rolls around. But you can kind of see where we are right now just in terms of our JK enrollment. So as we've been doing research, Pam and I have had a lot of meetings with she and I and Sarah. Lots of conversations at this point with JK teachers, just getting their input and ideas, conversations with Leslie at School Age Care, and then also just doing general research with some districts that currently offer a full day option. And this is kind of the summary of some things that we think could be some real advantages to offering an all-day option. So we've talked a lot about enrollment. This would be, I would say, the leading reasons why schools that I've spoken to and reaching out to have moved to a full day option. They were frankly trying to keep the kids that they have here. Research will show you where families start is typically where they stay, so there's a lot of value in grabbing our kids early and having them have really positive experiences here as youngsters. We've talked a lot about just the competitiveness of school districts kind of obviously now. And I'm going to continue to talk about declining birth rates because it's not an excuse, it's a thing that I think kind of moves into this category of, again, thinking about enrollment and how do we get creative about doing something a little bit different, something out of the box that we haven't done before. Lots of research behind increased kindergarten readiness, so not only social and emotional skills for school readiness, positive impact that schools see on student achievement even at a really young age, and now schools have been tracking that as those kids get older in comparison to the cohorts that only had a half day, for example, and seeing some real good benefits there. Earlier access for families and students to interventions, support, and resources that schools provide all kinds of families, so being able to access those things a little bit quicker. Decreased daycare costs for families, that's also been a really big driver for many of the schools that I've talked to, just in their demographic of wanting to ease some of that burden. And then having a consistent schedule for families. This is something that I've heard from our own families a lot, that half day for some families is tricky. The 4K wraparound has been very helpful. Many districts ended up moving to a full day because they didn't have a JK wraparound option.
So we're very thankful that that's something that we have. But these are, I would say, just kind of the top things that have risen to the top of our list of some things when we think about what would be some of the big advantages. Then we talk about some of the challenges. So any type of addition for a 4K all-day program is going to be a cost to the district. So as of right now, knowing what we know about enrollment, projected enrollment, we would have to likely hire 2 additional JK teachers, 2 additional paraprofessionals to go into those classrooms, and then looking at supplies, furniture, really obviously equipping full junior kindergarten classrooms with all of the stuff, which gets really expensive. So this would be a cost right off the top to the district. Pam and I have talked a lot about space. We're not even sure right now if we could make that happen. So we've had a lot of conversations of what would that look like in our current elementary. Potentially, would we have to move JK back up to this building where it was kind of intended with all of these classrooms here. We don't love that because I think, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think having the JK in your building, if you want to speak to that, has been pretty positive.
Speak for me, yeah. You know, I wanted them down there and I love having them down there, so it would be a big loss to me, I think, if we move back up there, but, yeah.
So JK students don't count as a full FTE for pupils. We only get reimbursed at 0.6. So again, many of the schools I've talked to basically just said we had to make a commitment as a district that we know it's going to take a whole lot of junior kindergartners to be able to make up some of that revenue that you automatically get with a 1.0 student. So again, kind of goes back to that cost because it's not an additional JK student doesn't exactly equal an additional 7th grade student, if that makes sense. It takes a whole lot more of those kids to add up. The reality is we know not all students at that age are socially and or emotionally ready for an all-day school day. I also heard that feedback on, I'm going to talk about the survey that I sent out to parents. That came back from, I would say, more than a handful of parents of, I'm not sure if my child would be ready for a full day. So just kind of navigating that. Ensuring a focus on a play-based program versus now turning this into a full-day mini kindergarten, and how do we maintain that philosophy within that program. And then a big one is possible impacts to our current Spartan Kids Club staffing. And what would that look like with the staffing that we have? What would it look like to our current programming? And just having some concerns there. So all of that together. So I did send out almost 2 weeks ago a survey to any parent that had recently registered their JK student with our district, and then some other, I would say, kind of random emails and families that we knew about that have kids JK age. So as of this morning, I had 57 responses, which is pretty good. So first question is just tell me about your JK students, so residents versus students that are or that will be open enrolled to our district for the fall. So if the Somerset School District JK program moved to a full day, so my child would still utilize Spartan Kids Club either before or after school, so about 31%. My child would still attend a local daycare, so in-home or a daycare center, and obviously the biggest percentage of families said their child wouldn't need any daycare at all because they'd be at school all day and then likely get picked up at the end of the day or those kinds of things. And then kind of the big question I had is when it comes to full-day junior kindergarten, as a parent, what do you think? So you can see that 84% said they would be in favor of their child attending full day, and about 9 families said they would prefer their child to maintain a half day. From there, my final question was, what additional questions, comments, concerns do you have that would be helpful for me to know as we're just doing our research? So I pulled out just a couple that I thought were worth mentioning. Multiple asking if there would be an additional cost for full day JK, and the answer to that would be no. This would be fully funded by the school. Lots of questions about what the daily schedule would look like, what would the instructional model be, again, would it be a combination of play as well as academics? Will additional staff be hired to keep classes the same or smaller? Question about meals, breakfast and lunch, will a snack be provided? This was the biggest one, asking if there would be rest and nap time still, which I love. I thought this was a great question too. If we tried it and didn't like it, is there an option to switch back to half day, which kind of goes back to that kind of hybrid model? I guess I have kind of the same one. If I feel my child isn't ready, is there still going to be a half day option? So I would say lots of positive comments of Thank you for looking into this. I would definitely utilize it. Very, very positive. I honestly had no clue what this would turn out to be, if people were like yes or no thank you. So this, I think, if nothing else, has just given us some additional information as we continue to do some research. I, at this point, am not quite sure where we're going to go next. You might never hear from me again. I might be back next month giving you some sort of recommendation or somewhere in between. We're just still, like I said, trying to get as much information as we can, talking to a lot of other districts that have implemented it. There are only 3 other districts around us that currently have full-day JK. So I do think there's an entry point there that we could be offering something that not many schools do, but I also think there's some other components that that we want to obviously take into account and be really careful about. So, questions?
Yes, when it comes to the cost, the 2 teachers and the 2 paraprofessionals,
Yep.
Can I have an idea what the cost would be for that?
So typically you could say a teacher, you know, a good placeholder is around 90,000, roughly. Paraprofessional, somewhere between 25 and 30.
So that includes the benefits?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Other questions? Okay. More to come. Just wanted to bring you in the loop of what we've been chatting about. Thank you. You guys need a stretch break? Sitting a long time. No? All right. All right. Okay, all right, so I was asked to give an update on the strategic plan, specifically diving into strategies 1.3 and 1.4, which you guys discussed at your last meeting. So I'm just gonna put out there that I have a lot of info. My suggestion would be, allow me to go through the slides, maybe jot down questions and things that you have. We can always go back to any slide that you want to, but because of the volume of information I have, I want to make sure I get through it all. I may answer a question that you jot down, and then we can circle back to anything when I'm done, okay? All right, so want to kind of start with how did we get to our current strategic plan? So spring of 23, we knew that our previous plan was expiring, right? So now we have to start the process of what does it look like to create our next plan. So we worked with Partner Ed, who assisted with the process of developing it. This is something you've seen before. In most updates I give, I have this question kind of at the ready of this was basically our guiding essential question. Every conversation we had about creating this next plan was centered around how do we ensure that our district is preparing kids for an ever-changing world. Through that process, again now just about 2 years ago, we maintained the mission, the outcomes, and the values that were created with that previous strategic plan. These were only 5 years old at the time. Our group, when we got together, we felt like these still were really representative of what we were trying to do in the district. We felt like this still matched, again, kind of who we are, what we believe, what we're trying to work for with our kids by the time they walk across that stage. So none of these things were changed from our previous strategic plan. So we started the process of getting that plan going. So that process included in-person focus groups with student, staff, and our admin team. An online survey was sent out. All community members had access, parents, staff, for just about 3 weeks on our website, sending out information, Infinite Campus, so anyone and everyone could contribute and have a voice in this plan. We ended up having 2 key stakeholder group meetings, which I'll talk about in depth in just a minute, which involved parents, community members, students, and staff. I gave 2 presentations to the board, one presenting a draft of the plan that was eventually created and put together, asking for feedback, and then a second presentation when it was brought back as a final draft for the board to vote on. Once it was approved by the board, then the admin team took almost the entire summer and went to work creating all of the intricate action plans underneath the big strategies. So let's talk about that key stakeholder group meeting. So this was a question I think that came up last time. I think Matt, maybe you had this question of like who was involved, who was there. So we had 48 people participate over the course of 2 meetings. You can kind of see the breakdown of who those people were. This was a combination of people that heard about it and asked if they could be a part of it, people that were specifically identified to make sure that we had a wide variety and a diverse group of people sitting in that room, and people that we wanted to make sure fit into a wide variety of categories. We didn't want just parents, just staff. We wanted to make sure we had a good representation of our community, and I felt like we accomplished that. So as I said, we had 2 meetings, one in March, one in May, that lasted about 3 hours each. During those meetings, we took a lot of time, identified and discussed historical events of the district that also kind of bled into historical things of the community, which certainly have an impact on what happens in our schools. Took a lot of time examining current reality, which included enrollment, student achievement, programming, student opportunities, staffing, financial status. I won't read it all, but just kind of figuring out where we are at this moment in time. Then we went over all the data and themes that were collected from the survey. Again, community, parents, students, and staff all participated in that survey. And then we walked through an activity. Well, these were the questions that were on the survey. What do I like, what do I wish, and what do I wonder? And then we did what was called the SOAR activity, where we split into groups and we had people identify strengths and opportunities currently in the district, and then aspirations and results. So where do we see the district being forward-thinking 5 years from now? And how do we plan on measuring if we're making progress? So here's some pictures of what that SOAR activity looked like. Again, you can see a wide variety of people kind of going through using chart paper, Post-it notes, identifying again what those strengths, opportunities, kind of looking through, getting lots of ideas and conversation going, which moved into kind of part 2, which was our mind map activity. So it's very intentional that we ask people through this activity to identify the top priorities and most important strategies that they believe would prepare the district for student success. So, after going through this activity and identifying all the strengths, right, opportunities, aspirations, and evidence, we then had people start putting that information into what's called like priorities. So, when we were seeing themes over and over again, we didn't have 15 Post-its of the same thing. We just had one Post-it of that theme. Does that make sense? Okay? So we had people start identifying via Post-its, all right, let's start thinking about what are some of the biggest things that we want to have be a part of this plan. From there, we took all this information, and this is just a little bit of a snippet, all this information and started plotting it on what we call the mind map activity. So all those things that you see here on these Post-its from every person that was there, and this is specifically on night 2 of our meeting, and we had people start mapping out and putting them on this massive piece of paper and using markers to start drawing connections between priorities. So for example, if you saw something that said like financial stability and teacher compensation, for us that was an easy line to draw because those 2 things are going to be connected somehow, right? We might not know yet through this process, but we know that there's a connection there. So once we had all of these things plopped on this yellow piece of paper, everybody there, you can kind of see this large group here, was given 5 stickers, and you were to walk around this large piece of paper and put a sticker on the things that you felt were most important to you. You could put 5 stickers on the same thing, you could spread them out, however you chose to do it was up to you. So that's what you see happening here. People putting their stickers on the different things that were identified here, right? And at the very end, basically everybody in the room kind of took one look at, all right, let's take a look here. What questions do we have? What comments do we have? Is there anything missing? What do we need to clarify before we walked out of that room? And on this piece of paper, this is what you see, right? I'm going to zoom in just a second here. But even though you can't read the words quite yet, you can see people are starting to draw connections. You can see there's clusters of where people really felt strongly about some things that we really want to make sure made it in that plan. I told people off the bat that even if something doesn't have a sticker, if it's on this yellow piece of paper, it's fair game to be in the strategic plan. But we started with the priority areas of, all right, this is what the voice of the group here is saying, these are the things that are most important to us. And out of that, this is where I want to point your attention to DEI and SEL, social emotional learning. So this says social emotional development, well-being, and then DEI, students and staff, okay? So the first thing I want to point out, because I've heard this said, I didn't sneak in DEI and SEL into the strategic plan. I didn't write one thing on this piece of paper. I didn't put one sticker on this piece of paper. This directly came out of this, and this, okay? So, I want to back us up now, and I'm going to come back to this yellow piece of paper in just a minute, because another question was asked of what kinds of things around diversity, equity, and inclusion and social emotional learning was in the previous strategic plan. So I want to answer that question. So I go back to our previous plan, 2017 to 22. Underneath the strategy of educational delivery and the strategy of advanced services and operations. All learners engage in mindfulness practices to positively impact their social and emotional health. The School District of Somerset supports the social and emotional well-being of each and every learner. We embrace a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion and welcome new ways of engaging the unique contributions of all. And underneath advanced services and operations, the School District of Somerset continually evaluates and improves campus safety and security to support the physical, social, and emotional well-being of learners. So this was in our previous plan. Then we had to do some digging, because this wasn't something I had access to figure out, okay, we know that we had strategic plans beyond that one. What was in our previous strategic plan? So we were able to find information on our 2011 to 20 strategic plan. So these were the belief statements that were created as a part of that plan that, again, relate to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and social and emotional learning. An awareness of the diversity and commonalities of our community throughout the world is essential. Developing and maintaining relationships is essential. Teaching character education promotes a civil society. Every child deserves a learning environment in which he or she can succeed. Critical thinking skills and problem-solving skills are vital. So, back in 2011 to 2016, there were conversations happening about these same topics. Verbiage a little bit different, fair, although you can see, right, diversity and some of those things. But these things, by the way that we define them, which I will get into in just a minute, would all be things that fall into social emotional learning. Also a part of that plan, there was a section they called parameters, and all those statements were we will not. So these were ones that said we will not limit teaching and learning to just academics. We will not be limited by a narrow vision of the world nor operate in isolation. We will not be ignorant to diversity. We will not let external factors deter us from achieving our mission. So again, back in 2011, 2016. This was the one specific strategy within that plan that I felt related most closely to social emotional learning, which was character education. I won't read the whole thing for you, but this talked about professional development for staff. And underneath there, again, co-teaching, which we believe would mirror inclusion. Mental health, obviously, something they were talking about way back in 2011, which we still navigate now. Character education, by the way that we navigate social emotional learning in the district, this would be social emotional learning. Then we went back to 2006, 2011, and I will tell you that it was getting harder and harder, right, Sarah, my researcher, to find information, but we were able to dig up a couple things here. Again, so in that strategic plan, they had a strategy on character education, and again, underneath an action plan specifically for teachers, enhance the teaching and application of character education for Somerset, talked about positive interventions that pertain to healthy choices and wellness, character trait words, morning meetings, and integrating character education into the community. Then we went to 2001, 2006, found a strategy in there, again, that we believe most closely relates to this one in particular, social emotional learning, healthy choices for students. So back in 2001, they were talking about AODA program improvement, goal setting and character-based assets, student mentorship programs. Again, by the way we define things here, these things would be social emotional learning. Last slide on the history, the last thing we could find, back in 1996, and I'm told this was the first ever strategic plan in the district. Again, they had two strategies, one under student goals, where they were working on students doing goal setting skills and fusion of communication skills, problem solving skills. By the way we define social emotional learning, all of that would fit into that category. And then focus on a safe environment, so respect and choices and responsibility, again by our definition, social emotional learning. So I think this historical perspective is important because these topics, although the verbiage a little bit different, have been infused in the way that Somerset has done business, obviously for a very long time. All right, so let's come back to this yellow piece of paper, key stakeholder meeting. So we get done, all this is here. Eventually, we put all of this information into a draft strategic plan. The admin team got together over the course of multiple days, took all of that information, developed the pillars, developed the strategies underneath. This is 1.3 and 1.4, so this has been in existence since the very first rough draft of this plan. This document, as you see it right here, in May of '23 was sent to every member of the key stakeholder community group and all district staff with this document asking for feedback. What questions do you have? Do you see something on there that should be clarified, fixed, edited? Something that's not on there that we talked about? Is there something on here that we didn't talk about? I received 0 feedback from staff, and I received 1 email from a person in the community group here that provided these 4 recommendations for grammar. Thanks, Lori. You're welcome. I knew that was coming. And it was very helpful. So, but I want to be, I want to be very transparent that everyone that was in that group received an email with this document. I didn't get 1 question, 1 comment about 1.3 or 1.4. And I'm stressing that because, again, I've heard the narrative of Shannon snuck it in. Nope. I've heard people that were there that say we didn't talk about it. And I want to go back to all the way back here. Okay? I want to go back to here, every person in that room standing around that paper as we were having a discussion before anybody left. Okay? So, this document got sent. I showed you the feedback that I received. I cleaned up those 4 things. I took this document, presented it to the board for their review. No feedback was given from the board as well. Brought it back, and on June 19th, this plan was unanimously approved by the board. From there, we basically cleaned it up. Thank you, Alicia, for your Canva skills. Here are our pillars. Again, exact same information that's here, it just looks a whole lot nicer. Once this was approved, for the last 2 years, this document has been on our website. It's been attached to every board meeting agenda. It's been in our Spartan Scoop. It's been in our district calendar sent to residents, newsletters sent to residents, and these strategies have been here the entire time. Okay? All right. Updates to the board again. So this is a list of, and I won't go through all this, but these are the strategic plan updates that I have given in the last 2 years. Where I've talked about a variety of aspects of the plan. I've given updates on the action plans. Again, I went over this information, however many times it is there, a lot. So I feel like there's been a high level of transparency of what's in the plan, talking about the plan, that section 1.3 and 1.4 certainly hasn't been hidden. It's been out and about for almost 2 years. All right, so let's kind of break down 1.3 and 1.4. So this is the verbiage in 1.3, right? So let's talk a little bit about what that means here and what that, when we live and breathe that, what that means in our district. So you actually heard someone earlier talk about the definition from DPI, so I won't read that again. As a public school, this is what social emotional learning looks like. About a week and a half ago, our state superintendent declared a social emotional learning day. We didn't do anything with it here, but my point is that as a public school, the Wisconsin Department of Instruction is pushing this at a high level. Okay? So I think one of the easiest ways to kind of think about social emotional learning and what we do here is we focus a lot on skills and not necessarily teaching values. We aren't teaching kids what to think, what to believe. We are teaching kids what we believe are valuable skills to be able to succeed in the classroom, on the playground, and outside of our school environment, eventually in the workforce. And I'm going to talk about what some of that means in a minute. Social emotional learning is not a thing or a program. It's not a workbook or a worksheet. It's literally infused into everything that we do every single day in this district because we work with children. We don't work with robots. We work with kids. We work with human beings. And as a result, it's infused in everything that we do. So I've asked the building principals to give 30 seconds, if that. We pulled out some things because, again, I want this to be super transparent. We aren't hiding anything that we're doing. But when we think about social emotional learning, character development, and supporting the mental health of students, these are some of the things that in each building we navigate, that we've implemented, that we talk about, that we use. We'll start with the elementary.
So we have weekly guidance lessons taught by Mr. Hurt and Mrs. Fretz. Every single classroom in our building starts their day with a daily morning meeting where we really set the tone for the day. We have restorative practices in place. We have intervention groups facilitated by Mr. Hurt, Ms. Fretz, or our behavior coach, Lindsay Thomas, supporting students with their needs. We have a Growing Through Grief group that meets in our building. We have responsive classroom practices, including intentionality around logical consequences, teacher language. You've heard us talk often about our culture, climate, and belonging surveys, and then student check-ins with staff. I'm super proud of our proactive behavior team. We meet weekly and talk about all of the kids, all 580 kids that we have, what their needs are, how we can support them, how we can support teachers. And then our fourth graders do the My Saber screener on the computer, which is a FastBridge My Saber screener.
Middle school?
We have guidance lessons that occur throughout the whole school year. Through advisory, we use our top 20 as a basis for a lot of our curriculum, not curriculum's not the right, as a tool to provide some resources to those skills that Shannon mentioned before. Utilize restorative practice as a tool in our building. We have the Courage Retreat, which is a bullying prevention program. Weekly, we meet as grade levels to discuss those things that we see with kids and where they may need some intervention or some help, or how can we help them move along more positively in our building. Student groups, many of them like you saw from Pam, all those things that come up throughout the year when a need is there for students. Those are things that our guidance staff or our behavior coach put into play, working with students, working with staff and students, working with small groups, large groups, etc. We utilize the Growing with Grief program. I already mentioned top 20. We do our surveys to get some feedback from our kids of what they need now. Student check-ins happen all the time. I have 3 kids that every morning come find me and just want to say hi, say hello, say what's going on, what are you doing this weekend. Those are not digging in anything, but those are kids making that emotional connection with you, just to see what's up, and that's what they need in that moment. In the event we have major behavior things, we use a reentry program, or we meet with students, meet with their parents, create a plan as they come back into school or back into all their class schedule, to have success for them and those who were part of what was done. And then we also utilize the My Saber screener as well.
At the high school, just a lot of similarities, but one thing that we do incorporate at the high school are student mentors, specifically our NHS students. Our advisory, we start our day every day with advisory, which again, you've heard us talk about this several times, but having an intentional adult that kids can connect with and develop a relationship, having a soft landing to start the school day, utilizing restorative practices. Our 9th graders do a respect retreat each year with Youth Frontiers. We also have Growing Through Grief groups at the high school as well, climate culture, climate and belonging surveys. One of our special education teachers has a dog, Mabel, who's like a service dog that comes in, and Mabel's on a reduced work schedule, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, not able to do 5 days a week right now, but that's another component within our building as well. Some of the personalized education options that we have for students as we make adjustments to their programming based on where they're at a given time. We have problem-solving teams, so PST, where teachers are able to refer or put a kid up for PST so we can get all their teachers together to have problem-solving discussions to be solution-oriented. Again, student check-ins with staff, our SHS with character traits, reentry plans, or what Joe just referenced at the middle school. If we have kids out due to discipline or behavioral situations, having a reentry meeting with plans with the parents as well. Our health education push-in lessons with Ms. Colling, our counselor, and at times Mr. Berry with digital citizenship as well. The My Saber screener, our school counselors have individual counseling with students where they have weekly appointments with kids, or obviously if there's a student crisis, different team building activities. We have leadership groups that meet, whether that's with teams, whether that's with kids that are just looking to grow with their leadership skills. And then a variety of different student groups that our counselors run.
So this one comes up a lot, restorative practices. So this has been in our district for, I think we figured at least 7 or 8 years or so. These are the 5 questions that staff administrators work through when we're utilizing restorative practices. We don't use this for every situation. It's not appropriate for every situation. We do still have traditional consequences, traditional things that happen. But this is something we brought in, again, multiple years ago just to help kind of navigate different things that happen in the building, whether it's student to student, sometimes student to staff. We've used it staff to staff before as well. All right, so let's look at the action steps underneath the strategic plan. So these are all things that you've seen before. So I highlighted in green, this is the action step that we completed last year, and these are the different pieces of evidence that were collected last year to help accomplish that action step. These 2 things in yellow are the things that we're working on currently this year. And these are some of the pieces of evidence that we've collected underneath each of those. I presented these to you in December, so these things aren't new. This I presented to you a couple times now because that was last year. I won't read each of them, but you can kind of see, you know, we're putting in some different frameworks for behavior. Again, you've heard us talk about Respect and Courage Retreat, some things that we've done with St. Croix County to support truancy and students coming to school. Kate Swenson is a speaker that we've had come here twice now. You heard me talk last time about going to see Galen Elmore, Somerset graduate, speak in the cities a couple months ago. And then I think the My Savers, again, you've heard us talk about that a lot. That is a very specific social emotional screener. Information goes home to parents before we give it. You have the opportunity to opt your child out. I think it's worth noting in the fall that we had a 97% participation rate in grades 4 through 12. That to me sends a message that we have families that value getting at least some level of information about their child in terms of their social emotional well-being. So the next chunk are some of the questions that came directly from your last meeting. So what funding is tied to this statement? So I wasn't sure if that meant, do we receive funding? I wasn't sure, so my initial answer is 0. We don't receive any added money from anywhere because we have this as a part of our strategic plan. I'm happy to answer a question on it now. I will kind of pause. I don't know whose question that was, if there's something deeper. But we don't receive any additional funding, state, federal, because this is a part of our strategic plan. What programs are in place solely because of social emotional learning being put in our strategic plan? So first of all, it's not a program. And 2, as you've seen from my historical perspective, this has been something that has been implemented in the district since the mid-90s. As I said, it's about relationships, connections, skills, and the whole student. So I would say there are no programs and nothing solely at this point. We would consider this to be operational. This is a part of how we do business here when we work with kids. Question of total staff for counselors and mental health coordinators in our district. So we have 2 school counselors per building. We are just under the recommendation per the National School Counseling Association. They recommend 1 school counselor for every 250 students. So we're, I would say, right on, actually a little bit under with one of the buildings. But and then we have 1 student support coordinator, K-12 across the district, and I listed the variety of things that Carly Oman is responsible for either overseeing, supporting, helping to implement. This list, I'm sure, is not all-inclusive, but this was my best shot at coming up with all the things that Carly helps support. I'll give you just a sec if you want to run down there. I don't want to run through them all, but obviously she does a lot in our district. Does Somerset use a specific social emotional learning curriculum in our schools? If yes, what is it? So we determined we use 1 actual curriculum in junior kindergarten. Pam, if you want to talk about that for...
It's called Kimochis, and they're 5 little plushy characters that help kids learn about being at school, things that can come up at school, and then they learn like, how would this character handle it, and they talk through it. That was paid for through the mental health grant though, and purchased in 2022.
Okay. And then 2 additional resources that we use to support this work. You've heard Joe talk about Top 20 at the middle school. Again, it's not a curriculum. They use bits and pieces to help execute some things in advisory. And then we have some coaches in our leadership class that uses Changing Lives. Again, not a curriculum, but something that we go to pull bits and pieces when we're talking about leadership and those kinds of things. But other than that, technically by the word curriculum, this would be the only one in junior kindergarten. How does social emotional learning tie to culturally responsive teaching? So both emphasize the development of student identities, relationship, emotional well-being while recognizing and valuing diverse cultural backgrounds. Basically, if we had to kind of sum it up, it's students getting ready for the rigor that we require in our classrooms so they can carry that cognitive load. We know in order for kids to be able to learn, their brains have to be calm and ready. Again, I go back to, we have over 1,400 students in our district that walk through our doors every day with different stuff. It is a true art watching our teachers navigate that in the morning, getting kids ready. If you've never navigated a classroom of 25 kids coming in from recess, you better believe there's social emotional learning happening there. A little one that comes in after the night before they've lost a tooth, I'm telling you, math is not happening until there's some sort of interaction happening between that kid and that teacher of look at that tooth. I gave an example last week when I was talking to staff of, we had our hockey kids play in a state hockey game last Thursday, lost literally in the last second after battling to the last second, 4-3. We didn't have school the next day, but I'm telling you, if those kids would have needed to show up to school the next day, there would have needed to be some level of social emotional connection for those kids to be ready to learn. That's what I mean when I say that these things are infused just in the day-to-day operation of how we do business as educators working with kids. All right, I'm going to move to 1.4. Promote a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for all students. So these are, I'm going to work through these individually here, but these are the working definitions that we use here when we talk about each of these words. They may or may not match what each of you individually believe these mean, but I can tell you operating here, this is what we talk about. When we say diversity, providing opportunities for students to explore a wide variety of people, cultures, beliefs, ideas, and viewpoints. We're not telling people what those beliefs should be, it's providing them opportunities to explore and get a wide variety of perspectives on a wide variety of things. Equity, again, I believe this was potentially talked about earlier. Equity to us is all about access. It's not about lowering a bar to make sure that there's equitable outcomes. It's how to make sure every single student and frankly every family has access to the resources they need, specifically at that moment in time in their education, again, across race, gender, ethnicity, language, ability, sexual orientation, family background, and/or family income. Again, this is quoted directly from Wisconsin DPI, but I underline the word access because I think that's the most important part of that definition. How do we ensure that every kid and family has access to what they need to be able to do well here in our schools? Inclusion, behaviors that show all students are accepted, respected, and valued. And then belonging, the emotional and experiential outcome of inclusion so all students feel connected to their school experience. So for us, these are 4 different things that at times have 4 different meanings, but it's very intentional that these words were put into our strategic plan because we think this is a commitment to the fact of how deeply we believe in each of these things for our student experience and for our families here. Maybe you've seen this. We thought this was a nice opportunity to kind of, again, show that difference between equality and equity. How do you give people what they need? That doesn't necessarily mean that every kid needs the same thing, but how do you make sure that everyone has equal access? Again, we aren't concerned about making sure that every kid had the exact same outcome. That's not reality working in a school, but we do believe deeply in ensuring that every kid has access to what they need. I just want to point out, again, in our 2 pillars for students and staff, it's very intentional that we have the word inclusive in both of those pillars. Again, kind of putting right out front that we are a district. This is supporting an inclusive and supportive environment for our kids, and inclusive and supportive work environment for our staff. So a couple things that we want to just again kind of bring to life for you of what does that mean here. When we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, so it might mean providing our EL families and students with access to materials in their native language. Every year we have families that come in where English is their second language. How do we make sure that they have access to what they need for their students and their families to be able to be successful here? McKinney-Vento, so making sure that we provide all the services necessary for our homeless population, our homeless students. I would say those numbers unfortunately increase every single year. So how do we make sure those students have access to what they need? Sometimes it's academic, sometimes it's food, sometimes it's clothes, a wide variety of things. When we talk about inclusion, here, these are some of our biggest inclusive practices, so co-teaching. This district, many years ago, was, I would say, the front runner for bringing this model into a school. At one point, we had multiple districts coming in and observing the co-teaching that was happening specifically in our elementary school because of the outcomes that were happening and because people just frankly weren't doing it. So we're really proud of that. We have a transition program at our high school for our students supported by IEPs that are age 18 to 21, all about life skills, employability, how do we get them real life experience to be able to prepare them for the workforce. We have our high school life skills class, again, students supported by IEPs that have a wide variety of what we call life skills integration. So they sell cookies, root beer floats, deliver coffee, do all kinds of things, again, for some of those employability skills. Friendship games are things that we've been a part of and now we'll be hosting this year where we have a wide variety of school districts bring all kinds of students of a variety of abilities and do a really cool track day, which is super fun. And then opportunities for students with disabilities to be part of groups and be included and be accepted. We have tons of students with disabilities that participate in extracurriculars, Spartan time involvement, peer helpers, readathon. I mean, we had about 1 million things here. We scaled it back. Because this is something we've been really proud of for a very long time, of a district that is highly inclusive. It is not uncommon every year if we have new families move in that will comment on, I've never been a part of a district that is this inclusive, which is something we're proud of. We talked about restorative practices, so how we build community. We've also used restorative practices for academic circles, so it's not just some of the social emotional component. We also use it as an exit ticket at times to wrap up different lessons. JK and 8th grade buddies, so bringing those different groups of kids together, which is always super cool. We've had Amber Breeze come and present about that and Kristen Slater. And again, some of the different send-offs and things that we do for a wide variety of groups beyond just athletics, which is highly unique. I don't know many other districts that do send-offs for robotics, for cheer, for our dance, for solo and ensemble. A couple years ago, we made a shift in our, we used to call it our sports calendar, now we call it an activity calendar. And we include as many kids as possible on those calendars at the beginning of fall, winter, and spring. It used to be just sports, and now we include everybody. Some big examples, some small, but again, when we talk about promoting a culture, these are the things that we're talking about. All right, so for this step in the strategic plan, the two things that are in green were action steps last year. These are things that you've already seen. You've heard us talk about the culture, climate, and belonging survey. Those were public last year. I'm not going to click on them again, but you can see the questions that we've used. Equity audit, these are all things that are required. So it was kind of low-hanging fruit in terms of our strategic plan. These are things we don't have a choice that we have to do, but every year we do these, we get really good information of some of our data, how are things looking in terms of, again, ensuring that we are providing an equitable experience for all students, no matter who they are or what their background is. And then these two are in red because these are action steps that we haven't tackled yet. Frankly, haven't really even talked about them yet because we aren't working on anything in particular this year for 1.4. Okay? So some questions that came up. What programs are solely in place because of the statement? So similar to the previous question, I would say solely none. Anything that we have in place is something that has either been operational for quite some time. I wouldn't say we have anything specifically in place in the district because we have this statement in our strategic plan. Again, some of the history would show that many of these things have been in place in the district for a very long time, maybe just some different verbiage. What funding do we receive from having this statement on the strategic plan? Zero. Are our programs aligned to equity of opportunity or equity of outcomes? I talked about this a little bit, but we believe this is all about access. So it's not about making sure everybody has the same outcome, it's how do we get kids what they need when they need it. How is diversity, equity, and inclusion improve performance in our school? So I wasn't sure if there was a correlation trying to be made between this and test scores, which is a little bit of a stretch, but I would say in terms of our performance of students with disabilities on state assessments, I didn't put all of that into this. I can certainly provide it if needed, but we consistently have students with disabilities outperform the state on our state assessments, and that information and data has done nothing but grow. I've talked about co-teaching. I've talked about the push-in strategies we have versus pulling students out of the general education setting to make sure that all kids are educated in general ed when possible. A long time ago, removing remedial courses that were designed to be below grade level. We want kids to have access to grade level materials. We've talked about the culture, climate, and belonging survey data, which is something that we use. I'm thinking about it, I saw the other day, the middle school, when they did theirs in the fall, 97% of kids say they feel safe at school. 97% of students say that they have an adult at the school that they connect with. So that's the kind of data that we look at. Multiple years ago, we did a little bit of an audit on basically our language that we use in the district and really moving away from deficit-based to asset-based. So instead of using terms like SPED kids, those kids, behavior kids, being really cognizant of how we are talking about students and using student-first language. So we might say instead students with IEPs, students with behavior concerns, students experiencing homelessness. This may seem like a little thing, but this was a big shift in really just thinking about how we talk about kids. I talked about our transition program, and then I want to highlight our harassment and bullying data. So I know this is kind of a lot. I know most of you around the table have seen this, but I just want to bring it kind of publicly. That when you look at our bullying and harassment data trend, again, this is JK through 12, not pulled out by building or anything like that, but you can see over the course of from 2021 to last year, in 2021 we had 33 total incidents reported. Last year down to 15. You can kind of see the breakdown of some of the different categories because these are the ones specifically that we track and keep track of. So we feel good about the fact of what our data is telling us, our accurate data regarding bullying and harassment and those kinds of things. The numbers just continue to trend in the right direction, which we're proud about. So would I be able to unequivocally tell you that all of this is due to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools? I wouldn't be able to necessarily quantify that with a number, but I think these things speak for themselves that we've got some pretty good things happening because of the work that we're doing and the work that was already started a long time ago. So a couple other things that came up. Are we partnering with any companies, organizations, or consultants to implement SEL? If so, name them. So these were the ones that we felt fit into that category. You've heard us talk about Kathy Cranston come in. She's kind of been our resident expert with the trainings and things that we've done with restorative practices. Youth Frontiers is who we contract with to do our Courage and Respect retreats. Health Partners is who we contract with for our Growing Through Grief partnership that we have. And then Family Therapy and Associates, they are the company that we work with where they bring in their therapy into our spaces. Essentially, we provide a space and they bring in their own counselors. It's all set up through families. We just provide a more convenient space for this to happen instead of families having to pull their students out of school and those kinds of things. So like I said, we felt these were the ones that best fit into that category in terms of social emotional learning implementation. What is the process for parents to opt out of SEL should they like to? So as I've reiterated a couple times, I think it's not necessarily a thing. There are certainly some things like the My Savers, for example, that you bet that's an easy thing to say, I don't want my child participating. Many of these other things, as I said, are just woven into how we do business in a public school. And so I would just encourage if a parent has a concern about any of these topics, then they should bring it to their building principal immediately and start there. Okay. All right, lots of information. I'll take a breath. Actually, I'm going to grab my Snapple, and I'm happy to answer questions.
So regarding stakeholders, how many were there altogether? That was up there pretty quick, I couldn't see that very well.
I think you said 48.
48? How many of those were staff members or employees of the school district?
There you go.
You know the number?
No.
How many were,
I don't know. I didn't add them up.
7.
20.
20? Of those 20, do we know how many actually resided in the district?
I'd have to look back on my list. I don't have it in front of me. I don't know.
All right. I know you said it was hard to quantify or the SEL part of this equation, but yeah, when it comes to DEI and SEL, especially after over the last 10 years, how has that improved our academic metrics and enrollment?
I'm not sure how you would draw a connection between those and whether it's been a positive or a detriment. I'm open to an idea, I'm not sure how you would do that. I think it'd be hard to say that something related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, or social emotional learning was a direct impact on our scores, either being above, below. I'm not sure how you would make that particular connection.
But it's pretty important to you, I can tell.
What's important to me?
DEI and SEL.
Well, having a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, yes, that's important to me. Meeting the needs of our students, both socially and emotionally, is important to me, yes. Yeah.
So the different methods, through SEL and DEI, the various things that you talked about, have they actually increased enrollment?
Again, I'm not sure if I don't know if I would have anything to be able to say that these things were direct. I don't know. I don't know how you would do that.
Okay. And how about academics grades? Have they improved?
Again, I'm not sure how you make that connection.
I would say that if we have students that are upset for whatever reason came in our building, something has to be addressed to help them before they could ever attempt academics. Could I quantify that as they get an A, B, or C? I don't. But I do know that if they walk in and life was turned upside down last night, if we don't attempt to connect with their emotions, they're not going to perform in the classroom. I can speak to that for sure. For sure, that's true.
I know you're probably over 40, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I went to school, we didn't have SEL, but we were
Yes,
able to.
yes, we did. I will go to bat for you, but yes, we did. There's a ton of teachers sitting in this audience. We had SEL all the way through. I had teachers that I connected with far more than other people, and it was those teachers that I would go, and I'm still close to today. That's SEL. Relationships before the rigor of what's happening in the classroom. So please don't say we didn't have it. We did. We had it in the relationships.
I'm sorry, I wasn't asking that question. But
I understand, but this is a work session.
Yeah, no, I was just curious.
I'll reflect on, look at my favorite high school science teacher, Mr. Schliep, rest in peace. Awesome guy. What do you know we connected about? Life, hunting, and we did biology.
Sure.
My coaches I had, elementary teacher, Miss Cleveland, one of my favorite people I had in elementary. I don't remember exactly why, but boy, she sticks out when you ask that question. So I believe it was there. Did we have the acronym in place? No. But those practices of what adults that work with students do have always been there 40, 50 years ago, for sure.
Sure. Yeah. Or was it SEL?
We didn't use the acronym.
Right.
But it's the same thing.
But the process of, you look at the previous plans, I mean, we didn't have the acronym in there, but a lot of those things are there, just different verbiage.
Any other questions for Shannon or any other staff that are on this table? I think everyone's kind of open to any questions you have. All right, well then, I guess we'll move on to the strategic plan, language update. I guess I'm gonna start, I'm just gonna make a motion to move forward with leaving our strategic plan as currently presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we can have just a discussion. I just wanted to start that personally, I have been torn limb from limb trying to come up with language that could change or how I wanted to go on this situation. This is not easy. This has been a very difficult couple weeks trying to come up with what is the best for Somerset. What is the best way to show up here and say, this is how I think our district should move forward. And I wanted to see this presentation. I wanted us to understand what it means in Somerset. That's what we have to do. Not what it means at somebody's business or at somebody's college, but what it means within the walls of Somerset. If anybody has a question about that, they need to reference this presentation, which I hope will be presented or linked to the agenda. And we, as board members, as community members, as staff, need to share that information out to the public. So when someone says, you're doing DEI in your school, this is what we mean. This is what Somerset is doing. We don't have hiring practices. We don't have goals of that businesses have. We are doing something different here, and I really want to focus on that. Neola has given given feedback that our policies are good with how they are based on the executive order and the current Dear Colleague letter, that we don't have to do anything to our policies right now. We don't do anything different than we're doing here. There's a current injunction about these executive orders anyway through the federal court.
Not for this executive order.
That's correct.
For other executive orders, but not this current indoctrination.
Okay. Well, and in those executive orders, a lot of the language is that we don't discriminate based on race or sex. We don't do that here. Nothing in this strategic plan says we do that here. And I guess the last thing I kind of want to end with is we have a ton of staff who have reached out, who have showed up, have given information, are around the table, and are asking us that this is important in our school. This is very important to them. This is important to what they do. And I just ask myself and ask everyone around here, why do we continue to question the licensed, the people who have gone for the training, over people who are doing research and telling people how to think and what they're supposed to do because they've researched? I'm sorry, but I'm not going to trust somebody to do welding at my job who has only done research on how to weld and hasn't done it once in their life. A pilot to fly my plane. I'm not going to do that for somebody who's only researched it. They're not flying my family. I'm asking the people who are licensed and who are doing this day in and day out and living it. And that's what I think we heard tonight. So I guess with that, but the point I want to make, and then I'll stop, is that if there are questions, if there are issues, 100% you need to bring it up to the teacher, the administrator, so that if there are questions or issues with this, I'm full in support of you bringing it up to them. Yeah, I don't want this to be misconstrued that you can't question these. For sure, bring it up. Ask for clarification. I do. Other board members do. Other people in the community should feel that they can ask the question and get the clarity and information. So please keep doing that. But again, I don't think we need to do anything different than what we're doing right here.
I'm just wondering if all the educators are realizing how much these words have been hijacked in the last 10 years. Like, it's not, it is now representing something completely different to people. Are we aware of that? I don't know where things went off the rails, but it means something different to the majority of people. I think it means something different to the majority of Somerset residents, national. I'm not comfortable keeping these words with an executive order in place, we can go back to what Neola has said, but I saw, as far as like Title IX went, there were lawyers across the state telling schools they would lose their insurance if they did not implement Title IX. And here we are saying, this executive order doesn't matter. I'm not comfortable with that.
So there's several reasons to eliminate DEI. We've got the executive order that happened back in January 20th. Here we are almost 2 months later, and we're still talking to it like it's legitimate. The voters spoke loud and clear. Over 60% of the district voters voted against DEI. Yet here we're justifying it like it's okay, failing to realize that as an elected board, we answer to the district voters. That's who we answer to. And another thing is, this does not help us with our metrics. It doesn't help us being competitive. Our schools have to be competitive more now than ever, and it just seems like we're forgetting to do that, or we're living in a bubble where it doesn't matter. So having these words and embracing DEI in a strategic plan, which is actually very goal-oriented. I've heard from our elementary principal tonight that we're working towards the strategic plan execution. I heard from our middle school principal the same thing. I heard from our director of curriculum last month how we're trying to meet our goals when it comes to SEL as well. So it doesn't make any sense. The voters have spoken. We need to eliminate.
I have one more thing to mention. Does anybody remember the executive order that was on January 20th, 2021, that Biden called for advancing racial equity? And he spoke directly to systemic racism and systemic barriers, and this called for the implementation of DEI across all institutions, public institutions in America. So that makes me think that this could be baked into curriculum. In fact, one of the three main publishers in the United States, one which we use, McGraw-Hill, I was just on their website the other day, and their mission statement says, "We foster a culture of belonging and we work with partners who share our commitment to equity, inclusion, and diversity in all forms." That's still not defined for me, what that means to them, and I would need to go through the curriculum, do a DEI audit of what that means before I am comfortable with anything. I think we need to do that.
Honestly, I think the people of the community are smart enough to separate the negative stigma from DEI at the national level. We will say it has had a very negative at the national level. As these three words, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as three separate words and not a program or anything like that, which we do not have any specific DEI programs in the school, are good things. There's nothing wrong with diversity, equity of opportunity, inclusion, nothing's wrong there. I believe that the people in this community are smart enough to make that separation, that there are negative DEI policies statewide. As somebody who works for the state of Minnesota, I have seen those policies. And there's negative DEI policies nationwide. That does not exist in Somerset. That does not exist here. And as we've been shown through our slideshow, everything that we've been told, it does not exist here. So we need to separate the negative stigma and look at those three words as good things within the community. It's good to be diverse. It's good to provide equitable opportunity and inclusion. There's nothing wrong with that either. So I think we just need to trust that the people in town are smart enough to realize that there is a big difference between what's being preached and sold and at the national level compared to what is happening in the district, which I think, being equitable, being diverse is very good, especially as the differences I've seen as somebody who went here in the 90s, it was not much of those things. and it's good that it's been pushed and that kids are learning to where when they leave a community like ours, they're able to get into a different environment and thrive.
Matt?
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight that there is a difference, just like Ryan just said, between the national kind of rhetoric around this statement and what's actually taking place. I appreciate everything that was presented tonight. I had questions 2 weeks ago. Those questions were answered. My concerns revolved around programming. What's changed? What money do we take in? What are we doing different as a result of that? And it was very obvious, based on what was presented, that we didn't change our practices. I look at this as what is the programming and curriculum. Now, we could go down a rabbit hole of curriculum and publishers, but we have to remember this is public education. I may completely disagree with DEI and the way it's presented at the national level, but I put myself at this table in this community with an open mind and as an individual that's willing to look at what are we actually doing, what is all of this staff doing every single day to help our kids, and is this statement of DEI impacting that? And what I saw tonight was that no, it's not. That I think that there is a difference between what we're seeing at the national level and what we're seeing here in Somerset.
So,
Hold on, I just want to get everybody give a chance to speak. Ian, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I was gonna try and tie a bow on this. It's gonna be tough though, so bear with me. So everybody's saying DEI at the national level. You're talking about specifically liberal political agenda. It exists. That's not what I'm seeing in our plan, but they're just words. We could change the words. It would mean basically the same thing we are doing now, and it wouldn't bother me a whole lot. I don't know if other people would bother. But it's not going to change anything. It's kind of like removing a policy about masking, giving our district administrator authority to make the decision. So now there's no policy, so it's at the discretion of our district administrator. Just not accomplishing anything. If there's, people keep asking what it is you have an issue with, specifically, if you can point to it, we can deal with it. Is there something that you saw in this presentation tonight that you have an issue with? That's anybody.
yeah, it's baked into everything.
What is baked in?
Hey, you're getting a little excited.
I'm just asking, what is baked in?
So, Department of Education has been pushing this on our schools, okay?
Pushing what? Please, I'm
DEI.
really looking, what in DEI, Steve? I keep asking for specific examples within the Somerset school walls, who I am living in 2 different buildings, and I just am not seeing it. I am involved in everything. I'm micromanaging to the core, and I am not seeing it.
All right, so if that's the case, and if it's all harmless, then why do we need the words, why do we need 1.4? If it's all, it doesn't exist, then why do we need it? And why do we need 1.4?
Then why do we need to remove it?
I'm
If
just-
we're not gonna change anything.
Obviously, for the reasons that we have an executive order.
That's a little disingenuous because everybody that's saying executive order right now, 6 months ago was telling us we don't need to do what the federal government tells us to do. Same goes the other way. So people pushing that we don't need to do what the executive order says, the same people tell us we had to do it.
Laura, you haven't said
You know what I
anything
mean?
yet. Do you have anything else?
Everything we do in Somerset schools concerning diversity, equity, and inclusion, and social emotional learning is for the benefit of our children. It's to help them learn. It's to help them be good people, to have empathy. for their classmates, to help them grow into adults who contribute to society. And everything that I've read and seen about these executive orders have nothing to do with what we are doing in a public K through 12 school. Can you please show me anything in any of these executive orders that has to do with a public K through 12 school? Because I don't see it. And everything that we've had in our strategic plans since 1996, and Steve, I've been here for every single one of them, and I've been on every single one of those committees. There's nothing in any of them that I would change or that I would quit doing. It's important for our kids.
So what you're saying is, the language in the prior strategic plans is exactly like this.
I'm saying it's very similar, and the outcomes are basically the same. That we're teaching children to have empathy, to understand their emotions, to be able to talk through things instead of hitting. I mean, that's pretty basic, but that at the elementary level and even at some of the middle school and high school levels are what we're teaching.
So if it's all there anyway, and it's always been, why do we need these exact words in the order that they are?
Do you want to call it equity, inclusion,
No, I
and
don't want to call
diversity
anything
instead of
equity.
it then?
I don't want to call anything equity, because I didn't see
All right.
equity in prior strategic plans.
All right, so just hold on. What I'm gonna say is,
Yeah, it was in
I'm-
the previous ones.
so everyone has had their chance to speak. We have a motion and a second. I'm gonna call for a vote. I think we could talk about this all night long. I think we just call for a vote, and then we'll move on, we'll move from there.
So can you repeat the motion?
Alicia, do you have it?
The motion is to leave the strategic plan verbiage as is.
Okay, and Lori did second, so I'll start with the voting. I'll say yes. Danny?
No.
Matt? Yes. Steve?
No.
Ryan?
Yes.
Ian?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5-2. We'll leave things as they are. Thank you, everybody, for that discussion. Shannon for pulling together everything, and that will be linked to the agenda.
Yep.
So again, I stress, if people have questions or comments, that is where we go and send them to get their information. All right, next item on the agenda is policy 2416, student privacy and parental access information, to information. This is a follow-up from a policy we made some changes to this fall, and Danny was doing some additional.
We did not, this is not a policy that we made any changes to this fall.
We never made anything?
This was never brought by Neola for an update.
Okay.
No, these are just my edits, so.
Wasn't there some language that we changed to add that optional surveys would be?
No, we never carried through with it. This is what Danny is suggesting, that we include in the policy to cover optional surveys.
Okay, all right, Danny, I'll let you go ahead.
So basically that first, no student shall be required nor given an option. So Lori helped me with that first nor given an option, which covers everything else in the policy, and then everything else in green was just added what I call like protections. For what the A through, and I added I. Controversial issues under discussion at school board level within the last 12 months. I thought that would be a good idea for that not to be brought up in the classroom. Just keep that nice and clean, the same way we had the last board meeting. We had public comment moved up so the students could focus on what they were presenting and not what was going on here. same thing for that. And then as far as like go down to student privacy, personal information, I looked at the California Consumer Privacy Act and just kind of modeled some of that privacy after that law, which is one of the best in the nation for privacy. And then just a little bit in green at the end for under consent, just making sure that, clear that consent to survey is not assumed. Written consent should be gathered annually by parents, minor children, and parents and students should opt into all surveys.
So I have some questions about what you've added here. Why is before and after school added?
That was from other cases that in surrounding districts that were brought to me as information that things actually happened. So I thought it would be good to include that. I can talk with you more privately about that, but I didn't think it would hurt to
Because
have
I
that
just
in
don't
there.
understand, if you're talking about things that the school controls, I'm not sure that it is under the school's purvey to say what happens before and after school. If it's not a school program.
And that's what I thought, like originally I thought that meant like a sports team taking
Sure.
survey, but then I think again, does that fall under a school program? So it doesn't matter if it's,
So if it's part of a school program, then this policy would cover it. So I don't think we need before and after school.
Okay.
Is this our existing policy?
Yes, with anything in green was my additions, suggestions.
So this is just your additions, everything in green?
Yes.
Nothing from Neola?
No.
Anything from,
No.
just your research?
Right.
Your opinion? Okay.
So I would run this past Neola and legal.
Is there anything of these green additions that you can kind of point to an incident happening, that's why it's here?
Just the top part, the
first one.
optional.
The only thing that happened here in Somerset
Right.
would be the words that refer to anything that happened here in Somerset would be nor given an option.
I think that's what we were talking about. I guess I thought it would, but I guess then, yeah, I do remember, we didn't actually vote, you were taking it away, so.
It took a while to
Yep, that's
work
fine.
on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what, some of the other green additions, I'm concerned about because they're rather vague and open to interpretation.
Okay.
And I don't think we want to have things in our policies that are not specific. I mean, who's to say what a politically controversial stance is? You know, I see the ones that you've listed, I certainly understand why you listed them. But if it's something else that we don't have listed there, then
Is it principal or is it the? Yeah, who picks it? Yeah, I don't. Do we have any Neola policy review sessions coming up anytime soon?
well, we have a batch that we need to be going through, but I don't think that
It's not ready.
ready yet.
I just.
From them, it's not ready from them.
Maybe getting their take on some of these comments, just to see what it does. And I think like even the controversial topic and controversial issues, I was thinking the same, like what does that mean and who picks what's controversial and not controversial? Is it any topic brought up at a board meeting?
Well, I guess it could be this one tonight, or
Well,
it could have been book bans, or, I don't know.
But, and I agree with that, yep, but then I'm like, where does that line go? Like how, like any vote that was a non-unanimous vote, you know, I mean, it could just open up. Can.
Are these all options from a template that you found?
No.
No?
Can anybody clarify, so we talked about looking at this, and I thought the board agreed that we weren't interested in looking at this. Does anyone recall?
We did
No.
not say that.
We did not,
This was gonna come back.
it was just gonna come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been kind of ongoing. I think Danny's been trying to dig into just possible changes and, well, I'm not gonna answer for you. I mean, you,
I guess when I look at this, I would like to know, like, what specifically has happened that we need to change it? And if there isn't something, then I'm not interested in looking at this again at this point.
It's preventative.
I would say I would be in favor of changing that first line, nor given an option. And I would be fine with putting that, voting for that at the next meeting and putting that into practice. Just gut feeling, I'm just saying, like, would be bringing, if we want to review comments with Neola possibly in our next batch, I'm for reviewing it with them possibly. I mean, I could send it.
So that would mean that a staff could not, without written consent, right, can't even have the discussion, give the option to take a test or to take a survey.
That has one of these following items A through H in it. So like at the beginning.
But isn't that what we do now? Isn't the practice now that all of that goes out at the beginning of the school year? Anything that is gonna be talked about in the classroom?
Yeah, I think the controversy came when there was an optional survey that involved some of these A through H, and that did not go out because by the letter of the policy, it didn't need to. I think.
Because it was not required.
Correct.
Because, the green was
Yeah.
not in here before. It was, if it was a required survey, you needed to have sign off. But if it's optional,
So the policy as it was and as it is was followed correctly. But now, right, the recommendation is whether it's optional or required, either way, it goes home first if it involves these, right?
But then written consent has to come back.
Well, the way it is now, I believe you would, to opt out of it, you'd have to have a written request to opt out.
Right.
but I think it has to go home. There has to be a letter sent home that we are giving this survey.
I will speak in favor of Danny's additions, and especially that first paragraph, the language, we give an option. I like the language at the bottom, the opportunity for parents to opt their children into participation in any survey involving any of the above items. I think you put a lot of work into this, and I think we need to consider these. I mean, clean up a little language perhaps, but overall, I think they're very good.
I'd say at this point, run it by Ed.
Run by Ed.
You can pick out what's vague or redundant or doesn't.
Does he just do that if we send him once to look at?
I believe there's an additional cost
Yeah.
to that,
We have to pay
and
for it.
they will also tell you that you should also run it by your own attorney. At least that's been my experience in the past.
Yep.
So you're looking at an additional cost from Neola and an additional cost from our school district's attorney.
When some of it's already covered and redundant, I mean, HIPAA protected information, it wouldn't be something you could get anyway.
Right.
I mean, I get having it in there, but are we okay going with your suggestion?
Just the nor given an option.
Yeah.
I am. Do you want to make a motion and have
I
a
think-
vote on it?
Well, it'd be like a first reading, right? Or can we do that? We couldn't do it, there's no action.
Right.
We could bring it back.
We can bring it back.
Does anybody want it to go to Neola and our lawyer in the meantime?
I don't want it to go to our Neola or our attorney as it is. Because I think we've already discussed some things here and have agreed that there's a consensus about some things to take out.
I'm fine with it going to the attorney.
How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I would like it to go to Neola and the attorney as well.
I'll second that, Neola and the attorney.
I don't have a problem with
I think, like, what are we asking them to review? Like, I don't agree with the politically controversial stances. I think that's way too vague, and I think we're wasting everyone's time and money to look at that. HIPAA protected information.
The before and after school.
Yeah, like, I think as a board, we need to decide what does this need to look like and then send it, if that's what we're gonna do. I'm not in favor of this, so I don't want it to go to Neola or an attorney to look at it at this point.
So, I guess so tonight it was on for suggestions draft, or not suggestion, but just discussion. So,
Can we turn this into a working document like we have in the past? And everybody can look at it and make their suggestion?
so I guess with that, and we've done that, and I think that's fine, but the thing we can't do is if someone puts a comment on it, we can't comment on their comment.
Yes.
But if you have a comment about, I think we should remove, this, you would not respond to that in a way of saying, I think we should add this. So if we can do that, like, if we can just look through
Suggesting the change.
things, we could say, if someone says, I would like to remove this, someone else could say, I would like to remove that as well. But like, as long as we're not.
Or change something or add it or whatever.
Yep. So I think that might be a good, let's put a working, Alicia, maybe we can get a working doc, I think you have the Word document now. So we can get a working document, let's make some comments, and then we can bring it back for the next meeting, and then come with language that either we want to put into policy right now, and then if there's things that we want to review with, we could, does that sound?
Maybe avoid option.
Okay, all right, so we'll bring this back for review. Please look at it, make some comments. We have 3 weeks to do that. All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Danny, for taking the time to put that together. All right, next item is the consent agenda. Is there anybody willing to make a motion for the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the personnel update and the athletics activities personnel update as presented.
Second.
Okay. Lori first, Matt second. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes 7-0. All right, general information. So our next meeting is March 31st with the listening session 30 minutes prior. Please sign up. If you're able to make that listening session, up to 3 board members. The one thing not on here for the spring election is you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but, hold on, maybe no. On the 20th, March 20th, from 6 to 8 at the library, the Chamber of Commerce is holding a
20th,
A joint forum.
a joint forum for the town, or the village board and the school board members. So just if anybody is able to attend or wants to attend, or
It's
just a candidate forum.
It's just the village and the school board. It's not because there are 3 people running for 2 seats on the town board. The town board is not part of it.
Okay.
I don't know.
It hasn't been in the past. It was just
But, so,
village and-
anyway, the village board and the school board members will be at that night on March 20th from 6 to 8 at the library. So if you want any more information, or go ask some questions, or hear what they have to say. And then again, all the voting information, Q&A, and from what I understand, I don't know when this will go out in the Star Observer, but I think they've been reaching out to school board members too, so I'm guessing that will come out soon, so if you're looking for additional information. And then, the spring election is Tuesday, April 1st, will be the day after our next meeting. Okay, district celebrations. Matt, I guess start with you.
Yeah, just boys hockey wrapped up. Great season all the way to the state tournament, so congratulations to them. Everybody worked really hard. Lori, thank you for another year of ski club. Much appreciated. Just in a few years, I've seen that program. It's gotten larger and larger every year, up to 2 buses. So I appreciate all your work that you do for that. Then I had one more thing too. Oh, and then just congratulations to theater over the weekend. So I appreciate all the work, and I'm looking forward to next year when we have a functioning auditorium. So that's it, thanks.
Steve?
I'm gonna pass.
Ryan?
I'll say congrats to the theater as well, and I'm very excited for the auditorium. Since the 90s, we've been looking for it. Since we were performing at the Village Park, where I was at that school in the old little stage there, we've been looking forward to it, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So congrats to that group, and then congrats to the boys basketball team on a good season.
Ian?
Echo all that, and thank you, everybody, for putting all that together. A lot of stuff to go over. I hope everybody watches it, and if you have friends that have issues like we're hearing, have them watch it, so they can see what's going on, and if they have questions or things they don't like, I'm happy to listen, but I need to know what that is. You can't just throw like a vague term out there and say it's no good. Show me what's wrong. We will work on it.
Thanks. Lori?
The summer school registration is due at the end of this week. Our summer school is a wonderful program. We have a lot of participation, so make sure you get your registration in if you have children to go to summer school. And congratulations to the 4 6th graders. Do we have any middle school people here yet? Who qualified for the next round of the National Civic Speed. Civic engagement, how wonderful.
Good, Lori? All right. We'll talk about state hockey. Winter sports wrapped up, so I know last 2 weekends ago there was a state or a sectional final hockey game here, and then all those kids went over, not all those kids, but a majority of those kids went over to St. Croix Central that night, and a lot of fans, so that was awesome to see, kind of a full day event with everybody involved. And you know, I sent out kind of an update of that a week ago or so, but you know, with a lot of our staff, right here, Amanda, Trent, Troy, we're all there all day taking care of a lot of that stuff. We had 2 hockey games, state final hockey games, or sorry, sectional final hockey games. A lot of students involved at both of those events. That was great to see. Spring sports began today, so good luck to all them. I hope they're excited for that new track, and can't wait to I think we have some JV meets this year, so that'll be great to see. And then Annie, we went this weekend as a family. That was great to see. It was a great play. They did awesome, and I think someone brought it up. There was 50 people, 6 through 12. I think the middle school kids did the set. The middle school tech ed class built some of the set. I mean, I just saw it like a 6-12 actual program, so that was great to see. It's through all levels, and they did an awesome job. And I'm really excited, like everyone said, for next year. And then, if you have robotics or not robotics, robotics state next weekend, or this weekend coming up. So good luck to them. And then, I didn't say it last time, but Shannon put it in there, and I forgot, someone even texted me before the meeting last time to bring it up. But, you know, we talk about reading or different reading that happens at the school. The readathon at the elementary school raised almost $30,000.
Awesome.
Sorry, stop. Go ahead, Danny.
Yes, congratulations to the elementary school for $29,000 for the readathon. That's amazing.
All right, anybody have anything else? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed?